So I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the May 22nd, 2018 regular session of the Winchester School Committee. We have a very full agenda. We'll have opportunity for public comment. I don't see yes, we will have a student report. We will have a report on K-5 Science/STEM from Catherine Dwyer and Mary Beth Lamare. An energy update from the Energy Management Committee. Susan McKee is the chair of that. We have subcommittee assignments to discuss. I'm going to, with the approval of the rest of the committee, just move that to later on the agenda under the chair report. We have a vote to accept some grants from WFEE, a vote to approve a late night trip for the chorus, a vote to approve overnight 8th grade Washington, D.C. trip. We're going to be approving student handbooks for all levels, a vote to approve the school meeting calendar for next year. We have a vote on a lease for the Mystic School that we're going to defer until the next school committee meeting. And then we have some job descriptions and just a number of gifts to approve, and we're going to discuss and approve the open enrollment for next year. The chair report, superintendent report, and our future agenda items are the professional development plan report, recognition of retirees, and a school committee reorganization is on the docket for the next meeting, which is on June 5th, and the meeting after that is June 19th. We do have need of an executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with our teachers union. And we'll announce that at the end and reconvene only for the meeting, only for the need to adjourn. So, is anyone here for a public comment? No. And you know the drill. Please speak into the microphone so that Wincan can capture your comments.
You want me to turn it?
Yes, that'd probably be good. And just always, give us your name and briefly. Yes, sorry.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rachel Phillips, and I live on Manchester Road. Regarding various aspects of the Skillings Lights policy, I would like to make a correction to some comments that were made at the last meeting about the first one about new tile field lights and some important facts that cannot be overlooked. There was significant opposition by the neighborhood at that time to lights, and in fact, lights were only able to be installed on the very far right-hand side field. And if you're looking at the field, it's way over to the right. There are no houses even visible on new tile fields, and there are no abutters to the lights, only the back of Mahoney's Garden Center. It doesn't affect the neighborhood, as it will affect Manchester and Skillings Field, so a comparison to new tile field is not even germane. I urge each of you to go over and observe those differences. Another concern I have about the last school committee meeting on May 8th was how the vote was made, and I feel clarification is necessary. The vote was made in favor of lights at Skillings Field until 9 p.m. Suddenly, in an instant, the vote was recast for 9:30 p.m. after whispering was heard at the table. All discussion stopped about lights on Sundays or not having lights on Sundays, and everything shifted to the field solely as a revenue source, and all concerns from the neighborhood were suddenly ignored. In addition, comments from the committee regarding proximity to Stop and Shop parking lot lights seemed to be a justification that the Skillings neighborhood was located in an area of town that deemed it unworthy of consideration. It did not reflect well on this committee and showed disrespect to the longtime residents who came to make public comments and voice concerns about how the lights will impact their quality of life. I would also like to speak about a comment made by Mr. Paul Maganero that the lights at Manchester Field will now have to stay on until 9:30 p.m. because school is going on an hour later. This statement only shows disrespect and lack of consideration for the neighborhood, as if we don't exist. The last time I checked the average real estate values and tax bills, we all pay a lot to live in Winchester. Every Winchester resident deserves to enjoy their home and their neighborhood in a quiet, dignified manner, and to receive the same consideration that all of you would also like. I invite each member of this committee and Dr. Evans to come to my home to have the opportunity to observe firsthand how close we are to stadium lights and how much sports activity our neighborhood already handles on a daily basis, and to provide visual legitimacy to our concerns. I look forward to having each of you come visit. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Sylvie Durand Morris, and I have two children at McCall. I've got a 7th grade girl and an 8th grade boy. And I started a little bit of a firestorm on Facebook, on the residents page, with regards to the dress code. And the reason that came up was my daughter came home from school that week that an announcement was made about how students should be aware of their bodies and be aware of their clothing and be aware that there's no shifting of garments as they walk around the school. And she came home so upset. And we talked about it, and she's never been dress coded. She's a very sporty kid. She wears, I guess, what you would call conservative or modest clothing. She wears shorts and t-shirts. And but I wouldn't mind whatever she wanted to wear, because she's a athletic, smart, fun kid that can wear pretty much anything and be all of those things. And so we looked around the internet, and she found this quote that was sort of on somebody else's feed that said, "When you interrupt a girl's school day to force her to change her clothes, or send her home because her shorts are too short or her bra straps are visible, you're telling her that making sure boys have a distraction-free learning environment is more important than her education. Instead of shaming girls for their bodies, teach boys that girls are not sexual objects." And I have an 8th grade son, so I definitely don't see the boys as villains in this situation, but I do feel like the girls should not be looked at and judged by the school and by the administration to determine whether or not they're appropriately dressed when they go. These girls are already going through a lot. Their bodies are changing. There's a lot of judging of from peers and things like that. And as I looked at all the comments that came on after I posted this, I wasn't sure what I was going to get. I said, "Gabs, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen here. This could be like, everybody could just say girls should be in school uniforms, and that'll be the end of it." That's the town reacting. There were so many positive and strong comments, and she was just so impressed by the community and what people were saying. And I think that what struck me was how many high school girls remembered being dress coded and the humiliation that was years after it happened. And I just don't think we should do that to our girls anymore. So I just wanted to bring that up and share my opinion and why that was posted a few weeks ago.
Anyone else?
Pamela Court. I have 2 middle school students, a 6th grader and an 8th grader. My 6th grader is a girl, my 8th grader is a boy. I have to confess to contributing to the firestorm on Sylvie's post. I posted a lot on that I commented a lot on that particular post. As always, I'd like to say thank you to the people who serve on the school committee, because it's an enormous amount of work and you have a huge load of issues that you have to deal with and enormous responsibilities, and I always appreciate that, and I always appreciate your willingness to listen and hear what we have to say. And so I would like to speak just a little bit further on the dress code. I'd like to echo what Sylvie said. I think that we as a school have a responsibility to send the message that girls are to be honored and respected, and that I don't think the boys are necessarily disrespectful, but when we send them home with a handbook that talks about how girls should dress and not being a distraction, we give them a message. We put that thought and those ideas in their head that it's okay. They're not innately there necessarily. We're teaching that to them with a dress code that's like that. And so we have a responsibility to do better and an opportunity here to do a lot better. And so I'm very grateful to the people who have worked on that and for the work that you're going to do on that. And I appreciate it. I'd like to add one personal comment on that. I found out when all of this sort of came up and I was talking about it at home, I found out from my daughter months after the fact that she had been dress coded. And so she had been asked to go talk to somebody in the office about her bra showing outside of her shirt. And I don't know the exact details. She did not talk about it, admittedly did not talk about it in a way where she had felt shamed or embarrassed or upset. But she had been dress coded for that. And my daughter is somebody who dresses fairly conservatively and is pretty sweet and innocent. So it was a little disconcerting for me to find out about that months later. And so I want to ask this question. Why aren't parents notified when this happens? If my daughter gets sent because she's violating the dress code, why did I not receive any kind of notification of this? Why am I finding out about it months later and really through the luck of having the conversation because the issue came up on Facebook? I'd like to see a dress code that sort of addresses parent notification and letting folks know. Because I think if it happens, if your child is if a dress code is written thoughtfully and your child has violated the dress code, you should know that that's happened. A dress code should be serious enough, and a violation should be serious enough that a parent should be aware of it. If it's something like a bra hanging out, it shouldn't be a dress code violation. I understand that the new language addresses that particular issue. But in the future, moving forward, we should have a dress code that is so difficult to violate that when it is violated, parents should be notified. And that shouldn't be a burden to the school to do so. I think at the last parent-teacher organization, or I guess it's the McCall Parent Organization meeting, George had talked a little bit about language in policies that can be burdensome to the administration. I don't see parent notification as being burdensome in this particular case because it shouldn't have to occur so often. And I'd also like to see a dress code enforcement that is done in an even-handed way and maybe has some guidelines in there so that you don't have to worry about interpretation from one person to the next, because we all have different values and bring different things to the table. So I appreciate the work that's going into this, and I thank you again.
Is it okay? Okay, I think I'm the speaker. My name's Karen Caputo. I live on Soul Road. So I am on the school council, but I'm not really here to talk to you about that. Right now I'm really coming as a parent and also as a social worker. The idea about dress codes and the changes that are being made, they're being made throughout the country right now. People are looking at this. There are models out there, which I would like to submit, actually. There's a model, the Oregon Now, which is the National Organization for Women. They put out a model that they ask for enforcement, but they also set up a spirit and some goals for dress code that I think are really important. I think we should have an understanding about what we're trying to achieve with a policy. And part of it is that we don't want a certain group of students to be impacted more than another group, because that would be discriminatory, and we don't want to have that. It's something that, like, many schools are moving out of that model, right, because it's not fair. So we certainly have a history of that here at McCall. That's something that we worked on. I think the admin and the teachers were open, and there's some really good progress, significant progress, but I'm cautiously optimistic, I have to say. Because, and I have two things that I'd like to submit. Can I just submit them? Or how does that work?
Yeah.
Can I just?
Or do you have copies for something for us to look
They're
at?
for you guys to look at, yeah. Not for right this second, but whenever. But, what was I? So basically, I think as good as we make a policy, in order to make the change that we want to see, I think we're really looking for a change. What I'm looking for as a social worker and as a parent is a culture change in the school. And that's trickier than just writing a policy that has nice language, non-biased, gender-neutral language. Obviously, that's, you know, a goal, but to make behavior change is different, right? So I think that one of the things that a couple of the parents and some students wanted was some enforcement or response policy, so like a little bit of our responsibility of the administration towards the students. And the NOW document provides what, you know, a model for what people are looking for, and a lot of schools are moving towards that, so that's something that, you know, you could look into. I think professional development for the admin who are responsible for the response of the policy is really, really important in changing a culture. If something's been done over and over and over again as a social worker, I know what it takes to make behavior change, help clients make that change. It takes a lot of work. And without that, a policy is just, it may not be worth the paper it's written on if that stuff doesn't happen. So what I'm really advocating for is professional development. And I know that we heard that that's going to happen, and that's wonderful. I just want to make sure it happens. And accountability. What's the accountability? So for the staff and the admin, where is their accountability? The students have the accountability to dress appropriately, but what is the accountability from the staff and admin? And I think, like I said, the NOW document provides some really specific enforcement policy that you can use, or response policy if you don't want to call it enforcement. The other thing, another idea is have a report come back to the school committee. How is it working? How is this policy happening? Without accountability, how do we know that things are changing? If you just write a policy and you don't follow up on it. And that's really all I have to say. So just that behavior change and culture change takes a little bit more than just writing policy. Thank you.
Is that everybody?
No, one more.
One more?
Are there empty seats around?
Yes, there are.
It's going to be a pause for seating.
Sure.
We're only out in the hallway, so some can't see.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm Anika, and I'm in 8th grade. I also have a comment about the dress code. So I have like a friend who got detention for like showing her bra strap, and I also have like friends who like, I guess also show their bra strap, but they would have to like wear like a sweatshirt to like cover it up. So I just want to know if like, yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that everybody? Okay. All right, thanks everybody. So next we have the report from our student rep.
Hello.
I need.
Almost there. Seniors made it. So, just run down the list. Over the past day or two, we've had NIAS come and do visits to the high school. I'm sure they've liked what they've seen. Senior events last week. Last week was their final week of school. They had bike day, several senior events. I think at one point they were playing basketball in the parking lot. It's a fun week all around. Later this month, on the 30th, there will be the senior prom, and the beach party will be on the 31st, and eventually graduation will be June 3rd. Over the weekend, our high school band played in Anka. That was great to see. A little break in the rain, which was nice. Aside from that, within the school, there was the Seniors Honors Art Show. They called it Shag House this year. I really enjoyed it. I had several teachers, I saw several teachers taking their classes down just to see the art show, which was really interesting, because I mean, it's sort of an interdisciplinary kind of thing. I know in English class, we analyzed the satirical elements in several of the pieces of art. Junior class awards will be tomorrow night at 7 in the WHS auditorium. On the sports front, we have boys and girls tennis doing really well. They've swept both Woburn and Wakefield within the past week. Girls lacrosse beat Waltham yesterday. And the boys and girls track teams both have several events moving on to the Division II state level coming this Sunday. That'll be exciting to see. Student Council is hosting a shoe drive. All donations can just be dropped off outside the office in a box. There's also an eyeglass drive until June 15th. Those can be dropped off in either the library or the main office. Winchester's Got Lunch is having a canned food drive. Any canned food is welcome. And the NHS Craft Fair will be held this Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. and I'm looking forward to that. And lastly, I was lucky enough this past weekend to attend the MASC, Massachusetts Association of School Committee, student workshop for student reps on school committees. That was enlightening. I know all your secrets now. But, thank you for giving me that opportunity, and I look forward to continuing.
Thank you.
Thank you. So before he leaves, I saw Nate's picture with some of his peers from other districts. MASC was posting that, and you looked like you were having a great time. I just wanted to ask, was there a highlight? What did you like most about that experience?
My highlight, alright, so personally my highlight was actually not having to voice many concerns, because there's a lot of concerns across the board about things as simple as lunch lines, availability of library space. We don't have any of those problems, so I was really happy to see that. I think the most important issue for the Winchester School District, which came up, was social emotional health, and so that carried over into workload and where that pressure is coming from. That's the specific question I asked all of the other student reps, is where are they finding that pressure is coming from? Are they just being funneled into certain classes from their teachers, just the way the course system's set up, or is it coming from families, the students themselves? And for the most part, other towns said that their course selections are very restrictive, and so students find themselves funneled into APs where they can't really get out, and the stress just builds and builds, which I didn't necessarily find true in Winchester, because we have a lot of freedom in the courses we can choose, and we don't get trapped into any courses. And I ended up identifying more with just only a town or two where they said that pressure is mainly from students themselves, where it's just a very competitive atmosphere, and that's the way it is.
Thank you.
Last word is go. So, if I could ask the science post-indulgence on timing, I know that we have a report from the energy folks, and they have a hard stop at 8 o'clock.
Sure. No problem. Anything, Hugh.
Thank you. Science component to energy? So welcome, Susan, I think we all know you, and
Yeah, hi, I'm
really
Susan
benefit
McPhee.
from
I'm the
the-
Energy
yeah.
Conservation Coordinator. This is Mark Sassy, who's on Energy Management Committee as of this year, and Carl Rexer, who's our Chair of Energy Management and has been on for several years.
And I've been to other school board presentations as well.
So we have a very fast update, but hopefully we can cruise through a lot of information. And this is a first go-round, and these are projects that will be coming back before you by and large in the future. So to start out with, because our most time-pressured person is Mark. Mark is our resident expert on solar, especially large-scale solar, working with a number of municipalities and schools and colleges. And we've been wanting to do solar here in Winchester for quite some time. So I'll give you a brief update on the history of it, and then maybe Mark can take us into present day. We've run 2 unsuccessful RFPs for solar in the past. In each case, we had 1 respondent, and we never got to a contract in either one of those situations.
We were trying to put it onto a couple of elementary schools at the
Right,
time.
plus DPW, exactly. So our sense was, once the high school was open, that gave us an opportunity to put together an array that would be of a size to attract reasonable pricing, reasonable interest in the marketplace. Period, new paragraph, just as the high school was opening, the state was going out of business on how they were incentivizing solar arrays. So the whole Massachusetts solar business kind of has gone into a bit of a hibernation, while the new incentive program has been worked out, trialed, and is now starting to come live. So there's a major incentive for us to get up to speed and be there as the new program, which is called SMART. In the old program, it was called SREC, so Solar Renewable Energy Credits. The new program is called SMART, and it's a series of stair steps down. So the first project through get the most incentive money, then when a bucket or a tranche fills with X number of megawatts, you go to the next one. So the more time that goes by, the less incentive money that you're likely to get over time. So we would like to be in that first bucket, and that gives us more advantageous pricing. So that's where we are today. With that said, instead of doing competitive RFP, there is, like MAPC, there's an organization called Power Options that has put together a competitive bid on behalf of municipalities that we can participate in without having to go through the whole exercise of our own RFP, which we've clearly not been that successful with. So their RFP has come up with a vendor called Solect, who has installed over 40 arrays, especially on schools and municipal roofs. So we started to kick the tires on that, and Mark has been very helpful in that process. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mark to get us up to present day.
Well, thank you for having us this evening. It's a pleasure meeting with you all. I'm a somewhat newly resident of Winchester. My wife grew up here her entirety. So my background is in energy consulting. We help, my firm helps a lot of cities and towns evaluate solar projects, energy projects, how they use energy, how they buy their energy. Taking a look at the town and the schools, so the project scope consists of the high school, Vincent Owen and Ambrose, and then the DPW building. Those accounts typically consume energy at a rate about 16 to 18 cents a kilowatt hour all in. The initial rate that was proposed by Select is about 10 cents a kilowatt hour, so there's some significant savings and also risk mitigation as far as the future market risk. We've been able, through our industry knowledge, to negotiate them down 20%. We think that there's still a little bit of opportunity, but nonetheless, the school has a terrific opportunity in front of it to save some money, offset its carbon footprint, and hoping to leverage it as an education tool for the surrounding community. As Susan mentioned, this is certainly a first go. I know it's kind of a surprise to many, but due to the structure of the state program, it's really to the Board of Education and the town's best interest to move as quickly as possible. The savings analysis over the 20-year term shows to be about $1.5 million for all 4 locations. So that's some real money to help out the town.
Yeah, because basically, as many of you know, in residential solar, you either have the option of buying the panels yourself or doing a power purchase agreement where somebody else owns the panels, they put them on top of your house, and then they provide the power to you at a reduced rate, but they own the panels. That's essentially what this is on the municipal level. And there are several reasons why we can't really buy the panels ourselves in an economic way, because as a town, as opposed to a residential situation, residents can sign up and get those sort of SREC credits and things like that. But with the program, a municipality cannot buy and get those credits unless something's changed with the new one.
Right,
I
so,
just want to double check.
right, so in this situation, the town and the school system would essentially be leasing the panels over the term of the contract. And this has several benefits. One of them being that the onus of operation is really on the owner of the system. So if there was ever a problem, they don't get paid. If they're not producing power, they don't get paid. So it's in their full incentive to make sure that they're operational. That being said, the owners would insure it, they would make sure it's operating.
O&M, and then they get the tax credits. That's the other big
Yeah.
piece. There's a big tax piece that gives them profit that we can't realize because we don't pay tax.
Don't pay taxes to begin with.
Yeah, so that there's a couple reasons why it's sort of different than the residential solar that you might be considering for your roof, which is often a very good deal, but this is sort of structured with the incentives are in a somewhat different place, which makes it much more advantageous for us to do this power purchase agreement. And basically, what we're saying is the cost for providing electric power to these school buildings is going to drop from 18 cents down to 8.5 or so. Doesn't cost us anything, doesn't, we're just leasing the space, making an agreement to lease the space to them. They're getting some of the money from the tax credits, they're getting some money from a couple different sources, and we just get cheaper power coming off our roof, and making the example to our children that, hey, this is something that's a renewable source, and so it's a win really for everybody.
So, one of the things that Susan came in and kind of gave us a preview. One of the questions that I thought we would all have is around what would happen if we needed to, for example, build out the top additional classrooms at VO, so that would kind of take part of the roof out of commission for a while. I guess the array could be taken off and put on the finished project as we've done the expansion, but who would handle moving it, and what financial impact would that have? And if you can kind of, we also
We're
have
in
a-
the process of kicking that back and forth with the vendor at this stage because we
Okay.
don't have a contract to present to you.
Okay.
But that's certainly something that's on our plate. So it's conceivable to just take it off altogether, not put panels in that space, period. There's also been interest in, can we try parking canopies somewhere? Maybe we could pick up some of that production by trying an experiment with solar parking canopies. But that has other challenges. It's certainly more expensive to install. So right now, we're having a flurry of emails and negotiations with the vendor to see, would we want to even put panels there to begin with? How much would it cost? Who would own it? What happens to the lost production and so forth? So there are many, many questions.
One other point though too is that we would not be puncturing the roof. So it this is not something that could provide any sort of opportunities for leaks. These would be ballasted and basically sitting on top of the roof without having to actually penetrate the roof. So I think that's just something to keep in mind, and it's an advantage of going with a system like this.
And if I could just finish what was on my mind. The other question that I thought we would all have was around, would our electricity rate go back up? Because the way that we get the benefit of having these panels is that we don't get revenue from generating the energy, but we do get it comes to us in the form of a discount on our electricity rate.
You're saying if you remove them?
Yeah, if you remove them, do we, do all, can you remove some and not all? Does the whole thing come offline? And if you do that, during that period of time, does your electricity rate go up? Is that what, I think that's not possible.
Yeah, that's a frequent question that Solec gets. So as part of the contract, they allow a 15-day period for roof maintenance, any sort of updates that need to be made, and we're going through some of the language and how that process takes place. In the case of a major renovation like BO, we'd certainly want to continue that discussion offline to avoid that sort of issue. But I think we've got some pretty creative options that fit into the SMART program. The canopies do have quite a large incentive, so we're going to refresh pricing and hopefully continue the dialogue with the group offline.
It's
You
a
mean
great
parking,
question.
when you say canopies, you mean parking canopies?
Yeah, but that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that,
Yeah.
that topic up, because
Okay.
that does make sense, that we want to make sure that we think about those things in advance in our negotiations, so that we already have something in place for if we do need to move them. How does that process happen? Great.
And I understand that you have been working with town council as well, or, Winchester's town council on the
Yes.
legal aspect.
Right now, because of the time pressure, if you can picture, we're reaching out to school committee, board of selectmen, and Meg White as sort of procurement czar or whatever she is, is working with legal. So we're working on all three fronts at once with the hope that we can bring this all back to center. Energy management has already voted favorable action. So we've got that behind us. But we're moving forward to try to see if we can bring this together into some kind of cohesive format that we can bring back to school committee and board of selectmen, or sorry, select board, for a vote in the near future.
Yeah. Also, just a point of clarification, when you're talking about the electric rate going up or
Yeah.
not, I just want to clarify that the 8 or 8.5 cents rate is just for the power that comes off the panels. So
Okay.
if it's a cloudy day or in the evening, or whatever, we're still paying our regular rate for our electricity. So these panels will not be generating 100% of the electricity for these buildings, but just a portion of the electricity consumed.
Okay, yep. Important clarification, thank you. So maybe, I'll turn this over to everyone else to ask questions, but I guess another way to go through this would be if we think of questions after tonight, we could maybe sort of collect them and have some meetings offline, or,
Yeah, absolutely, whatever works for the
superintendent
group.
work with you a little bit to sort of work through all the issues.
Right. Does anybody else have
Yeah.
other questions for us?
I have a question on timeline. When are we looking for this to happen?
So it's been a little bit unclear on the exact release date of this smart bucket tranche, but we believe it's going to be sometime in the middle of end of June when it's going to open up. Because of the hesitation from the Department of Energy, there's going to be a queue waiting to get into that bucket.
We want to be there in
Right.
line to get that first batch of money.
So if we kind of work backwards from a timeline perspective, it gets a little bit tight for all the different channels that we'd like to have consensus and input from. So I guess the feedback loop from this group and other groups, we're hoping probably a couple weeks in order to finalize all communication channels to get a coherent contract with the vendor.
And the contract itself, it will be, they are leasing space on the roofs of our buildings, so they're paying us for that space?
We
Is
get
that-
paid in the form of that reduced rate
Reduced
for
rate.
power.
Yeah.
So, but do we have to pay any out of, immediate cost?
No. And in fact, roofs actually last longer, and if there's air conditioning, the air intake is usually reduced by a few degrees, so there's indirect benefits that people are seeing that they hadn't anticipated.
Right. Yeah, and actually, I can say that on the residential side, I've seen that on my own house, that the third floor of our building is cooler because we have the solar panels on it. Because basically, the solar panels absorb the heat from the sun, so that it doesn't hit our roof and heat up our roof, and then therefore our building. So that is a side benefit. And there's some hot areas in some of our elementary schools that we've been trying to deal with. So we're thinking that, hey, this might be a very nice side benefit, that some of the heat might be absorbed.
I have a different kind of a timeline question. What's the installation timeline for projects like this, where we have kids coming back to school in early September? Is this going to interfere with our parking lots, the build-up play areas around the school, and for how long?
We've been given a preliminary timeline of 4 to 8 weeks, but they've come across this logistical issue at several other municipalities, and they would be able to schedule their vendors on off cycles for the school. So they were very willing to work with whatever the needs are from a timing perspective of the school operations.
What would be the likelihood that this could get done before school starts, though?
Yeah,
Sure. So possible, but if it gets stretched out, the installation might not be complete by the time school starts.
yeah.
In terms of an interruption for parking and so forth, basically all the actions taking place on the roof. So once panels are delivered and then put on the roof, that's, I think, a fairly short part of the timeline. So interruption for parking, kids going in and out, that's a much smaller fraction of the time that we're talking about. Most of the time is spent on the roof, working with the panels, working with the racking, working with interconnection.
And do you have any sort of examples, or has this been, are there any other districts you could, you could also bring this back to us, but if there are other schools that have gone through this,
That's
and
great. That's
they
a
have
great
track record.
That's a great idea. I think there are a few. Don't we have them off the top of my head?
Yeah.
We did end up reaching out to Fitchburg, Sudbury, and one other school, and they were very pleased with the performance of Select and how the project went. We got some input as far as also how to negotiate the terms with Select, which was helpful, but I'm happy to share those contacts if you'd like to open up a dialogue as well.
And that's with Select specifically. There are obviously plenty of schools who have rooftop solar and have been succeeding with it for a long time.
But would that be helpful for you?
I think
Would
so,
you like
yeah.
the contact information for
Yeah.
those people?
Our high school principal, Dennis,
I visited Wayland High School recently, and they finished a building renovation project much like ours, so their footprint hasn't really changed, but their teacher parking, and this was done after the building project, they decided they had a little bit of money left over, and all the rates came down, and they found a good deal as well. All the teacher parking is canopy parking with solar panels on top. It's actually very architecturally pleasing to look at, in my opinion. So it's something you might want to reach out to Wayland High School. I don't know.
The one thing I want clarity on, and maybe you already know, is what would we need to do to get access to the roof once we have the panels there? For instance, if DPW needs to get up to do something up there, do they need to contact Select? Do we need permission if we're leasing them? I just want to understand who has access to the roof, who has control over
Good
that.
question. So the design of the panels is designed around where access would be needed. So panels are only put in areas that are basically not useful. So drains are clear. There's always a gap, a margin between the edge of the roof and the panels. So basically you do your best on the front end to make sure that you're not going to create any problems during the lifespan. And by the way, it's a 20-year lifespan that we plan around. We can build in options to purchase the panels earlier in that lifespan after 20 years. The idea is that either the vendor pays to take the panels off, or we can buy the panels at fair market value, but that's a decision we make in 20 years when we see what's going on with technology. Are the panels being productive, so forth. So that's the general industry standard wrap up.
They can produce power 30, 35 years easy.
Exactly. So it could be that we just go, yeah, here's a buck, we're happy to have our panels for another 10 or 15 years.
Or at that point in time, after 20 years, there might be something better, and we might want to have them take them off, so we could lease this space again to somebody else to put more efficient panels on. So we'll wait and make those decisions later. We want to have some options in the contract, but we don't want to pick one now. And back to the space point, you might remember that we were in front of you talking during the high school building process, when you probably saw Susan in my face more than you expected, because we were trying to make sure that we kept some space available for this. So that when it came to where the pipes get put up for venting bathrooms and other sorts of things, we tried to work with the architects so that those were all pushed aside. So there were central areas that don't need the human access, that are just all sort of clear for those panels to go.
So I have several either comments, concerns, or, what's that? Oh, sorry. I was coughing earlier.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry I had to step out earlier. I was getting over an allergy cold, folks. So I had some questions, comments, and concerns, different thoughts. Big fan of coordinating this with new construction, so the high school was brand new, and as you just clearly articulated, there was an effort to kind of coordinate MEP locations. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I always have a concern about the longevity of our roofs. We have different kind of roofs in town. We've got modified bitumen, we've got built up, we have EPDM, we have TPO, and some of these are, you know, rigid over light gauge, some of it's over concrete. So when you talk about ballasted systems, which is actually what the committee was concerned about, Susan, years ago when you came to the school committee at Lynch, it was a PPA for Ambrose. There was concern there about roof penetrations, which was sort of where I was at. My philosophy on this has changed a little bit after that incredible windstorm we had in early April. I live on Forest Street, half the forest came down, and it was really something. Folks may not be aware, we lost on our brand new high school a large mechanical roof screen, probably about 12 feet by 20 feet. It weighs hundreds of pounds, if not 1,000 pounds, and thank goodness no one was at the edge of the building, because it went off the building, would have killed someone. It was actually, it's mechanically fastened, it was ripped from the steel, tumbled across the roof, actually punctured the roof. So when we talk about whether something is mechanically fastened or ballasted, and ballasted is a totally legitimate way, you know, to do this, a concern I would have would be what architects are looking at wind loads and design criteria. The EFPVC, between the architects that are on the EFPVC and the electrical engineers and electrical contractors that bring their own expertise to these kinds of projects, I think would really have an appropriate and helpful role. Frankly, not so much oversight in a formal way, but at least to be involved in some process, be sure we're asking all the right questions so that if we do go with a ballasted system, it's safe. If we ever have another storm like the one we just had, because that damage was really pretty impressive.
This just good to hear these sorts of concerns and questions, because we can then follow up with sort of to say, okay, tell us why this is okay or not okay, and help push them to provide evidence that their systems can withstand these sorts of things.
To that point, when we were designing the high school project, SMMA gave us specific, what do I want to say, design criteria for the gym roof in particular, because that's a pre-existing roof. So we've shared that with the vendor, and that is exactly what's in front of them. So everything that was built into that process at the high school is now reflected back to this vendor.
Okay.
That's a good question for us to follow.
And although we talk about PPAs generally as a 20-year term, I think someone was just mentioning we have the option of maybe buying them back earlier. So a couple of thoughts on that. The Ambrose roof is already 13 years old. I would love to see it go 30 years, but our history in this town is that 25 is kind of when we see and hear drip drip from our ceilings. That was the case at the high school in one area. I would estimate the Ambrose roof is going to need to be replaced in 2030, which is before that PPA would expire. So I would have a timeline concern there.
Pete is definitely making sure this is on our Ambrose's, his Ambrose's concerns.
And then even with VO, which we think of as a brand new building, that roof is already 7 years old. Still a lot of life in it, but to Susan's point, bringing up that expansion option, which was specifically designed, I want to second the thought that maybe that comes out of that. I mean, maybe it goes down to a 150 kilowatt, you know, maybe the scope comes down to something on the order of Ambrose, but the infrastructure is there, so the array could be expanded in the future. You know, if the MSBA keeps saying no to us on a new Lynch or new Morocco, that's where we're going. It's 5 or 6 classrooms there, the infrastructure's there, literally the structure is there, the bathrooms are there, we just need to build up the classrooms.
I will say there is specifications in the contract language that will allow for that type of roof upgrade when the time comes. So it's definitely a consideration, both select and the legal counsel of the town. The good thing about solar technology, though, is that it's always getting better. I think it's in the best interest of the school if there's concerns about the changing of the VO roof line to wait. There's always new programs, there's always new technology, and it's just, from a process perspective, it's likely not worth the risk for the town.
You mean for the whole project or for that component of it?
For that component.
Oh, okay, sure. In other words, you're saying back that out, smaller scale project, okay?
Yep. And there's nothing to stop the school system to proceed with expanding that if and when it's ready to. So.
Well, there are a few things that will probably try to stop us, but it's good to know that won't be one of them. Got to find the money if we need to do it. Thank you.
So it sounds like we have covered that, the solar power.
Great, more to follow.
Yeah.
Okay, I have two other small items, but Mark, if you need to head out, feel free.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. So there's two other quick updates. One is an update of a project that is in play and about to occur. I just want to make sure it's on everybody's radar. We're going to switch from oil to natural gas at Lincoln and at Ambrose. All the contracts are in place. National Grid is funding the run from the gas mains to the wall of the building. And we're picking up and taking it from there. Obviously, the most visible part is the exterior part, because after that, all the work is inside. The Monday after school gets out, Lincoln will start, so that's Monday, June 25th. It's a really short run from Washington Street into the boiler room, just right there next to the door. They project that will take 1 day, tops 2 days. And then as soon as they're finished with, this is National Grid, by the way, as soon as National Grid is finished at Lincoln, then they move across to Ambrose, which is a longer run. But again, it's, right off of, so that's where cars pull up, so that's a little bit more invasive. But they are projecting they should be finished by the end of the week at the latest. So that 1 week after school lets out is when all this work will be complete. Then Horizon takes over and does all the transitions of boilers, domestic hot water, so forth inside the building. That starts at the end of June, beginning of July, and will be complete long before school opens. So that's in play.
So I have a question.
Okay.
Capital approved both of these projects, as did Fall Town Meeting, so thank them very much. But Capital increased the cost of the project to cover tank removal. So is that happening over the summer? Is that something DPW is contracting out separately, or what can you tell us about that?
So it's not the same vendor, so it's not the same contract. It
Okay.
is the same account number as far as Stacy's concerned, but it's not, it's a separate purchase order procurement. So that is not on our, it's not on my plate at all. So I can't really speak to it.
One will be removed right away, and the other will be removed probably next summer or later.
Next summer.
Yeah, not during the school year, I think would be my preference.
Pumped up prior to that,
Yes, I'm sure.
What was your question?
Would be empty.
Pumped up.
Empty.
Empty, yes.
Yeah. Pete assured me today, I spoke with him today, he assured me that they monitor regularly to ensure that there's no leaks or concerns, so.
It's not more likely to leak disconnect than
Right.
Right. Okay.
So that's the update. And then the other project coming up, or I should say, it's not a project, we have applied for a grant. This was a grant opportunity that came up very last minute. The EON was advertised by the state in February, and it was a scramble, and the grant was actually due before town meeting. So that's why you haven't heard about it until now, because as we know, in the lead up to town meeting and during town meeting, it's all hands to tops. So this grant is to deal with heat mitigation at Vincent Owen, and it's also an opportunity to save energy. The grant is unusual. It's not like Green Communities. It's through another arm of the Department of Energy Resources. It's called the Innovate EE grant. So it's to, essentially the state is looking for new opportunities. Show us a new technology. Let's try something outside of the box, and let's find a new tool for our toolbox. So our grant application is for what's called a phase change product. So if you picture when you get an Amazon package and there's like bubble wrap and the bubbles are filled with air, this is like bubble wrap that comes in 2 foot by 4 foot sheets that are foil on either side, kind of like insulation, but inside it's called a phase change product. It's a food grade product. And it phase changes between solid and gel, so it's never a liquid. And as it phase changes, it absorbs heat. So you buy it at a certain temperature. So it's currently dominating the pizza delivery market because they'll buy it at 120 degrees, and it really wants to just stay 120 degrees. So you get a pizza hot at your door. Or the pharmaceutical industry will buy it at -20 degrees or whatever they need to keep their stuff really cold. So we might buy it at 71 degrees so that in the hot month in the roof of VO, the heat would rise and then get sucked into this stuff so it stays 71 degrees. So instead of reflecting back into the room will stay cooler. So this stuff rolls out in these sheets on a hung ceiling like this one, and you just avoid wherever there's a penetration. So not where there are lights, not where there are sprinklers, not where there are vents, but any plain panels would get a sheet of this stuff rolled out. So it would go in classrooms at all different levels, And in the winter, it would actually help keep the classrooms warmer, because if we bought it at 71 degrees and our current set point is 68, it's going to help keep the building 3 degrees warmer than the set point. So it actually will save us energy on heating, especially on those lower levels. And then in the warmer months, we'll have double the amount on the third floor, so it'll really suck in a lot of heat. And one sheet of this is the equivalent of 19 inches of concrete in terms of how much energy it holds. So if we have double the size sheet, it'll be the equivalent of 38 inches of concrete in the ceiling, absorbing all this heat. So I think it could be a really interesting win for Vincent Owen. Because it's a pilot, there's a lot of money in the grant asking for measurement and verification, so there will be a lot of measurements. So
Which we also thought was a great idea, because we were wanting to get more measurements anyway about what the conditions were in some of these classrooms. So that's actually a win for us.
Yeah, so it's a 3-year-long measurement and verification. In my view, if this really works, there are so many schools throughout the state of Massachusetts that are not air conditioned, or picture even in schools that are air conditioned, the tech room has the same set point as other rooms. They overheat. Language labs, there are rooms that are just hot all the time. So it could be a solution for tech rooms, air conditioned spaces. In terms of where else it's in use, there are over 1,500 chase banks that have this in the roof. It is out there. It's not out there a lot in Massachusetts, but it's out there in the southwest, west, northwest. It's in a school in New York where it's in use. There's a building that's just been built in Seattle that has no air conditioning and very little heating because they're putting it in the walls and the ceiling. So they're basically keeping the building at temperature using the same concept. So we think it's a really interesting idea. Should we get the grant, we will be back in front of you so that you can vote to accept the grant. But in the meantime, this is the idea.
And the cost to the town?
Yeah, the cost to the town, we will have skin in the game to the tune of $7,000 from the Energy Revolving Fund. The total cost of the project is $152,000, which is the product, and then also all the measurement and verification engineering to analyze the project. And we also have a letter from the utilities saying, yes, we're interested in this product. If this works for you, then this is a potential win for us, because that's the whole objective for this grant, to provide something that could work in other places in the state.
So we're essentially getting $150,000 of work done to try to keep our classrooms at the right temperature, and we have to pay $7,000.
And installation too?
That includes everything. That's the product, the installation, and all the M&D.
And so basically, you're not going to know it's there, because it's really going to be, they lift up these tiles, they slide it in, they put it back down. The installation's pretty quick.
And it's
You're not going to know it's there.
It just wants to go back and forth from gel to solid quietly. That's all it does.
We had a demonstration. We sort of like had a hard time wrapping our brain around this. And we had the representative company that manufactures it come to one of our meetings. And he had some of the sample material, and we asked him all sorts of questions about, like, do we have to worry about this leaking? Do we have to worry about ooze coming down out of our ceiling? All sorts of things, and that's where all the different other, especially he had a lot of banks and municipal buildings that this had been installed in, where everyone was really happy and people were not having any problems with it. So we're excited about it.
Why did you pick VO?
Because of the heat mitigation, yes, because of the heat
We have some problems
mitigation
with the heat there.
complaints on the third floor.
Oh, because Liz
Where's my call?
Well, yes, I know.
I know.
Well, if it's great, then it gives us a tool that we don't currently have to try to deal with overheating in classrooms all over the place.
Yeah,
So
so we tried it one
what does
place.
happen if it gets punctured?
Since it's a gel,
Yeah.
it's white in color and it would just ooze out a little bit. The only time that might happen, as far as we can tell, is during installation, in which case they would not use that piece and they would put a different piece in. But they worked very hard to make it as simple
Yeah,
as possible.
the gel isn't like a really runny gel. It's more like a
Toothpaste.
like a thick toothpaste. So it sort of, the gel sort of stays in place. It's not something that's going to be moving down. And to the point of which school, it's like, well, we thought, well, we can get this for one school, let's try to get it. And then if it works, we were so excited that then for other schools, we'd be able to consider this as part of the solution.
Can I just ask one quick question? Does this require that space cool down below 71 at night?
Yes.
So if there's, and do we know that it does, and when it's warm? Because if it's 74 up there the whole time, is it gonna serve any purpose if it stays 74 up there the entire time?
It will continue to absorb heat far beyond anything that we have now. But if it never gets below 71, which I would point out is probably, the third day of a heat wave, and in general, our heat waves are more July and August-ish, but who knows going forward. So that's the one downside. But it wants to absorb so much heat that I would think that even if it is just getting down to 71, 72 at night, you'd probably still be ahead of where you would be without it.
And still has insulation properties. So it still has some properties that are helpful for us. But you're right in that if you have a heat wave where it's 90 degrees at night, in the middle of the night as well, for multiple days in a row, then its effectiveness would be reduced.
It would diminish.
It would diminish. But I think that the likelihood of that is not so great, at least, so it would still be something that'd be helpful in the first few days of that heat wave, and then it would diminish.
It's only $7,000 to try.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And did you choose the 71 degrees, or is that just the product itself?
That's based on a study from Lawrence Berkeley Labs where they were studying productivity at different temperatures. So they have a very nice bell curve that shows 71 right in the middle, but it really runs from about 69 and change to about 73 as like maximum productivity temperatures.
For students.
So but we haven't really totally settled on that. We'll probably take the recommendation of the company's engineers.
Yeah.
Okay, so
But you really can't.
if you can change that, like if we knew, for example, what Brian's asking, that it stayed up too high, we could choose
Well,
a
you
product
order
that
it-
might be
Yeah, you
lower.
order it one way, so we would
Right.
need to decide on the front end, we would prefer 72 or whatever.
Right.
But we were just going off that productivity curve.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's a good point too, that if we discover that the 71 degree temperature that we buy the product at ends up not being ideal in some ways, if we are then but it's still helpful, we might want to then think about changing it to a 72 or 73 degree product at one of the other schools that we might
Right.
install it in down the road. So this is a learning experience for everybody, and we're getting involved early to have learning to help us and also many other towns.
Does this product have a name?
It does.
It's called energy blanket.
I think we got, did everybody get this? There was only
No.
one. There's only one.
Yeah, I know.
It's a really funky product, but it's
Very new.
It's very new.
New concept.
We're
And
excited.
you will be able to come
There's
back,
one more.
right?
Roy, do you want to pass that one? Sure. They also make, as I mentioned, they make it for walls. It's used in greenhouses where they call it the energy cloud, and it basically dangles in the middle of space. So they're using the same material in a variety of applications.
Well, thank you very much. You're not expecting a vote on this tonight, right?
No.
No, we'll let you know as soon as
We'll have
we're.
more
Chris has one more
questions,
question.
and we have so much more to do.
Right.
So,
We'll let you get back to your other issues.
to be continued.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
That Al Weil and John Nash somehow just be looped into it, since we're talking about this basically be a permanent installation in the building. So I was looking at what Susan circulated, just looking to see, is there an ASTM? Now, I do see an ASTM label on here, so is it appropriate, for the use, thinking about fire safety and so forth? Just be sure our authorities having jurisdiction are okay with it.
Great idea.
Thank you.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Susan. So now we can have our science upward, and they can explain what phase change.
Good evening, I'm Mary Beth Kamari. I am the middle school science curriculum leader, and I'm a grade 6 science teacher on the Gemini team. And I've been working with counterpart Catherine Dwyer.
And I'm Catherine Dwyer. I'm the new STEM coordinator for the elementary schools for K through 5.
So we've been in the process of rolling out the new Massachusetts Science Framework. So just give you a quick synopsis of what we've done in the past. The rollout of the new framework started around 2016. Last year we spent time with Dr. Elanima and Michael Marchand over there, our department head, looking at the frameworks that the state was rolling out and deciding as a middle school what we thought we wanted to teach. In the past, it was chemistry, life science, earth science in 8th grade, and the new frameworks are an integrated approach. So it's the idea that if you're teaching chemistry, there's a little overlap of biology, or there maybe there's an overlap of earth science. So it's a little bit of a change in philosophy. So we decided that we would roll it out first in the 6th grade. They decided to do these new standards because we really want our students to act like scientists and to think like scientists. And as 21st century students, not only are they using their devices and they're doing online labs and they're doing hands-on labs, we really wanted them to understand that all science is somewhat integrated and they're connected. So we decided that we would roll it out over 3 years. So this is the first year of the rollout, and the 6th grade has been doing this. Next year, the 7th grade will be rolling out their new frameworks, and then the following year will be the 8th grade. The idea for us is to really provide a more rich content and a more rich way of having the students practice the 3 disciplines all at the same time. And there's also a little caveat that we also have to bring in an ELA approach and a little bit more math. So what we decided to do in 6th grade in the fall, we focused on phenomena through earth science. We were looking at Earth's place in the universe. That was actually decided by the federal government with the NGSS frameworks, and we kind of jumped on board. So we started with exploring the Earth, good old rotation, revolution. We looked at waves. We talked about scientists and how scientists in the past have learned about these phenomena like Newton and Herschel and Ritter. Then we went on to electromagnetic waves and transverse waves. I dropped my E there. And at the same time, we also were trying to have that literacy approach. So we were teaching our students how to write a claim, evidence, and reasoning statement. So they come up with the claim of whatever the phenomena is. And as they're studying it, they have to provide evidence to back up what they're experiencing. And we've also done a little bit of performance-based assessments. There's my classroom there. They were experimenting with prisms. They were learning about how Newton broke white light, and then we went into Herschel and started talking about waves. So I have a little performance-based assessment also. As part of the science department, Amy Taylor and I, one of the other science teachers, worked with the Department of Ed, writing some of the lessons to go along with the frameworks. And I was lucky enough to be part of Judy's program with the MCEIA, looking at performance-based assessment. So in the fall, we decided to have one unit at the end that rather than giving an exam, they would be looking at the standards that they had to cover and perform some kind of product. They were either museum curators or they were designing rooms. That kind of went along with our last energy thing, where they had to design a room that allowed solar light in but kept sound waves out because it was a music room. Or they had to describe how we use waves every day. So this was one of the projects. We'll do a little quick blurb. I'm quite sure you'd rather see students' work than mine.
Do you have anxiety issues? Do you work too hard? Then buy the Slinky at the low price of 99 cents, plus applicable taxes and shipping and handling fees. The Slinky is more than just a toy. It was awarded Toy of the Year in 2000. It can be used as an educational utility. NASA uses Slinkies to conduct physics experiments. In the Vietnam War, American soldiers used Slinkies as radio antennae. It is also educational. This is a longitudinal wave made by a Slinky. The parts where the particles are densely packed are called compressions.
So they had to make an advertisement about Slinky. That was one of the choices. And they had to teach their classmates as a review about transverse waves and longitudinal waves.
The direction of the disturbance.
Do you want to watch the whole thing?
There are
Just the cats.
And then after we finished up that performance-based assessment in January, we decided to focus on life science. And in next year, it's going to be a little bit different. We did chemistry this year from January and February, and then we went to life science, but we really see the connection of chemistry through earth life and physical science. So we decided that in the fall, we're going to be teaching earth science with a base of chemistry, learning about hydrogen and helium. And then in January and June, through June, we're going to be doing our life science unit, which starts with atoms and goes towards molecules, cells, what's in a cell, tissues, organs, and body systems. So they'll be learning life science from January to June, but they'll be also learning chemistry at the same time. So it will be like a biochem course. And this is Callie Westerfield and Megan Wiseman, and they're going to just go through a little virtual reality tour. This is an app called HP Reveal, and our final performance assessment of the year will be based on virtual reality, where they are going to be teaching a concept by using a Erasmus app. So what you're going to see is Megan using it. So the virtual app actually allows them to put a performance, a presentation, without the stress of having to stand up in front of the class and do it. So we can do like more of a museum walk. And that's actually a cell model that's on my classroom wall. And if you take an iPad or a phone or your Chromebook and you just swipe it, it will open up the presentation that the student makes, and then they can look at it and observe it for all classes. So it allows my first period to see my third period. So this is going to be our final performance assessment for the year, and it will be based on the life science of the human body. So talking about living things. The real approach to science is really solving world problems, and one of the things I really had to teach this year was cell parts. And you know how you make those cell models, everybody brings them in, and they kind of like sit in the corner. So I'm kind of like, how can I make this a STEM lesson too? So I took an old lab that I had done a couple of years ago with my class on bioplastic, and we decided to make our cells out of bioplastic. We took a recipe where we took tapioca or potato flour, we added a little bit of water and a little bit of vinegar, and they made their mold, and then they had to design the parts of the cell to go inside. And then we planted them outside to see if they would really biodegrade within 4 to 6 days. And other than the one that one of the squirrels stole in front of us, they all biodegraded in a few days. So that is Preston and Max over there with putting their cell together. And then on the right side is a body system model that Ms. Capobianco is doing right now in her class. She and Ms. Taylor are about 2 weeks ahead of Mr. Crook and I, because we did waves in the fall and they're going to do that to the end. But they're making their own bodies, so every group of 2 is making their own body with all the systems. So this is totally new to 6th grade. We haven't taught life science in 6th grade at McCall, so it's a little bit of fun for us, a little bit exciting for the kids.
Great. So what does this mean for elementary school students? So there's switches in terms of the standards, what's being taught at which grade level in elementary school with new standards, but I think the big picture is really to echo what Mary Beth was saying. It's more about looking at science not as content, not as something that we learn about, but something that we do. So what's really come to the fore in the new standards is that the practices of science, what scientists actually do, are now explicit in standards. So what was once implicit, basically through the scientific method and through the different skills that people needed, communication and collecting data, things like that, have now become really explicit. So what we want to see in classrooms, when we go into a classroom, is we want to see students doing these things. And they've brought some things out, again, to the fore that maybe weren't as emphasized before. Things like mathematical thinking, to make sure that that's integrated into the science standards. Engineering has been integrated into the science standards for some time. Using models, something that scientists do for things that we can't necessarily observe directly or can't experiment on directly. That's how scientists understand big phenomena in the world, is by using models. And that's what we're trying to teach children, how to do the same thing. So to work, like Mary Beth said, as scientists do. So what does it look like? These are first grade students. This is a project where instead of saying, okay, we're going to study animals, we're going to study animal parts, what kind of habitat they live in, what do they eat, how do they live. the teachers approached it a different way. They said, okay, we're gonna give you a bunch of artifacts. We're giving you skulls. We're giving you paw prints. We're giving you scat. We're giving you pelts. You tell me, what is this? What am I putting in front of you? What can you tell me about it? How can you solve the mystery? And the kids have to work back, gather evidence through the process, and work back from there. So they're really learning to hypothesize. They're really learning how to gather evidence at a really early age. And what they found, the teachers were very excited about this. What they found was that it was highly motivating for students. And I have to say, I was very impressed because I was a 5th grade teacher. So first grade, we don't even expect first graders necessarily to be writing at this point in the school year. For a child to be talking about, we think it's a carnivore because it has sharp teeth. So I asked the teachers about that because I wouldn't teach a first grader the word carnivore. That wouldn't be a vocabulary term. And they said, oh no, they all knew that. They all knew that if the teeth are sharp, it's a carnivore. If the teeth are flatter, it's a grinding tooth because they need to eat different food. They eat plants and things. So that would be an herbivore or an omnivore. I was like, this is but really, that's part of what's exciting about it is because you don't teach kids the vocabulary. What you do is you teach kids, or you get kids to discover something, and then they find they need those words. They need ways to explain it, and that's why they take on that vocabulary, becomes their own. And the ideas become their own, and their project, this was also a performance assessment project, was to design their own animal with specific adaptations to live in its environment. Now again, these are first graders. Again, I wouldn't have thought that we would be teaching, it's not in the standard to teach adaptation specifically, but if you hear how kids talk about it, here's one. But this is how all the kids were talking about it.
This is the rainbow. It lives in warm, sunny places. It eats squirrels and small mammals. Predators are tigers. And its adaptations are that it has very sharp teeth and claws, and its wings are extra long so it can fly away very quickly from predators. And it has a very long and strong tail to bat away predators.
Really nice, and it's so beautiful that some of them are just hypnotized by it, which is what she wrote about. So again, what was interesting to me about this, I don't know if it's going to advance or get the video thing. What's interesting to me about this was really, kids in first grade using words like predator, prey, carnivore, herbivore, not above what I would have expected. They kind of raised the bar because they felt a need for it. And that's really when things like inquiry and kids' interests are driving things. And also the fact that the teachers reported that all the students were using that kind of vocabulary. All the students could understand, identify an adaptation of their animal. It wasn't just some of the kids who were able to do that. So the teachers were also extremely excited about the project, and some of the teachers were a little hesitant at the beginning of the year about the change, and through this process, they became completely not only on board, but like leading other first grade teachers.
That was on all levels.
Yeah, which is fantastic. So just a couple more examples about really how the process of exploration is driving learning, which is what all good science teaching is. So this isn't a change, but we are trying to make sure that it comes first. So this is a lesson that I do where I give kids a pan of a sample. I tell them it's a sample. It was dug out of a quarry, someplace in upstate New York. You tell me what it is, okay? So I show them pictures of where it came from, upstate New York, looks really boring, looks like a parking lot. Talk about what a quarry is, and then they have at it. And so what they find out through the process is they start discovering things that are in there, and they start hypothesizing again about what it is they're finding, and they start thinking about how the earth has changed, which was really the goal of this whole lesson, is how our earth has changed. And they start to figure out that they're finding sea creatures and what they could have been doing there, and they start to make up theories about what they're doing there. And then, at that point, I give them some tools. I give them a little bit of information, because I gave them very little information at the beginning. And what's kind of fun to see is just how then you give the kid a book or some kind of research tool, and then they're super excited, because they need to prove something to themselves. They're trying to find some information. These kids are kind of just funny. It's really So it's a squid, but but what kids were, kids were starting to dig things out of their pan and realize that these are sea creatures and think about it. And then they realize, then I give them some information, and then they're like, This is 400 million years old. What was it doing in upstate New York? Well, it must have been an ocean. Great, so I didn't have to teach them that. That's what they figured out for themselves from the process, and that's what we want to see. I think that's also something that we always have to keep in mind with science, is the power of a real thing. That's why kids like that lesson, is because they really know that they are holding something that's 400 million years old in their hand, and then it's real. And that's when I ask kids for feedback, they say, I like that you gave us something real. I like that you brought us something real. I like that we did something real. And that's a really important part of being a scientist too when you're in elementary school, is exploring real phenomena. So these are just examples. You know, you would think a flower would be something that most people were familiar with and not that interesting, but it turns out it's really interesting if you get to look at a real one and explore it on your own. You don't have to worry about the names of things, you're just exploring and hypothesizing, thinking about it at that point. These are kids this is a 4th grader, these are 5th graders here who are exploring the arc of the sun. What can we observe about the arc of the sun throughout a school day? 1st grade standard and 5th grade standard, and also learning how to experiment with things. They're experimenting with chemical reactions in a safe way, but they're doing it themselves instead of being taught directly by the teacher. Using models is a really important part of the science standards. It's really come to the fore, I think, to collect data, to collect information, and also to explain phenomena in the world. And these are 3rd graders. A model can be a very powerful thing in science, and it's just as powerful when you're in 3rd grade as it is when you're a scientist. So these are 3rd graders who are testing. He's got his hand in a glove full of Crisco. So they test their bare hand in it's a classic. They test bare hand in ice water, and then they test a variety of other materials. So to simulate fat, they test in feather glove, they test in a fur glove, and they're comparing. And really, if you've never done this, you should do it. Because if you ever wondered, as I have, like, what's it like to be a duck? Like, don't they get cold? You know what I mean? Don't those seals at the aquarium, aren't they freezing in there? Well, actually, they're not. And if you stick your hand in a glove full of blubber and stick it in ice water, you will find you can last in there for virtually hours. And so it's a model that allows people to experience something that they might not have been able to experience any other way. And you can see them gathering information and evidence. This is a model of something that's very difficult, even for really adults to understand, which is why the moon looks different at different points in the month. So phases of the moon, we find that it's a very difficult concept for people to understand. It can be very abstract. So having kids actually act it out with a model that actually shows them, and having them seeing that they can actually explain it after that, participating in that model, is quite powerful. Finally, engineering is obviously a huge part of the standards, designing and testing solutions to real-world problems. These are just a couple of examples. Again, where the content, the information really comes from kids' own exploration. This is also integrating mathematical thinking, because this is designing an earthquake-proof structure, a wall in particular. How can you design a wall that will withstand an earthquake with the lightest, cheapest materials possible? A real problem that engineers really solve. You give them a model, simulate it. It's very interesting to do with kids. Associated with how they study large changes in the earth. And this is 2nd graders who were very funny. We did a bobsled lesson to go along with the Winter Olympics this year, and we talked about friction and what kinds of sports you want friction and what kind of sports we want to reduce friction. And bobsledding is one where you need to have a little friction. You don't want to fly out from space, but you don't want to have too much friction. And so the kids would, we teach about it, but they're also designing a sled that can go either as fast or as slow. They could be the slowest sled and still get credit for that too. And so again, to see kids start to use the concepts that we're trying to teach them in science through the practice, that's really what we're trying to do. That's what it's all about. We too are thinking that this is a process. So new standards are a process. Most districts are taking between 3 and 6 years to try to implement them. That's their goal. We have sort of a 3-year plan of trying to get as much as we can done in 3 years, but I do want to emphasize it really is a process. I mean, I know.
And we've been working really hard together.
Yeah.
I've been lucky. Catherine's come to my class a few times. We've worked as a 6th grade group of science teachers with both the 4th and the 5th grade teachers. They've come to my classroom. We've come up here and worked with Jen in the professional development room. What standards are we teaching? How are we teaching it? How are we going to integrate all the elementary school students coming up to us in the 6th grade so we know what to expect? And we're doing it right now with the 7th grade. Jim Gogolis the other day asked me, like, what have you guys taught so far in 6th grade, so that we know next year what we might have to catch up because you didn't finish it, or we maybe it's totally new standards for them, so they want to make
Right.
sure that we're hitting as much as possible.
And we want them to have a coherent experience, and we know that's difficult when you change. So there's gonna be bumps in the road, but that's okay. That's the way.
Trying to make it as dynamic as possible. And hands-on, yeah.
Judy and Jen.
Yes, thank you.
Sounds great.
Hey, can I just give a quick shout out that it's knowing these two ladies that this is exciting, but I just want to say it's been a tremendous amount of work, and they've made that also exciting and accessible for other teachers and for the students. And it's funny, Catherine was talking about the blubber experience and the kids. I heard lots of staff being like their minds blown about it. So they have made this exciting and possible, and teachers across the district have been working really, really hard on this. And I think this is some of the most meaningful things we do. And they've done a nice job. They're both on different MCIA teams we have, and they've done a nice job of how all these initiatives aren't necessarily new or separate, but how you really can bring things together to just be getting at good instruction. So shout out to you guys, to Mike, to the teachers. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Well done.
Wow. Yeah. I just want to, if we're allowed, I just want to, being on school committee is such a privilege because we get to just talk and then you go to work. But I really love the idea of having this multidisciplinary approach to science. I love that the ELA and math and all that is coming together. I would love, you mentioned Herschel, and I was wondering if you...
I love Herschel, so.
But have you talked about
he's my personal favorite,
But have you
so.
talked about his sister? Like, what I'm saying is that humanities component of not only these amazing male scientists, but there's also these women scientists that we don't talk about, these people of different ethnicities, and just to kind of integrate that and to take us through the arc of history with all of this, it just, the energy you bring to it, I just commend that.
And that's been the hardest process this year. We were doing new frameworks and we want to hit, in middle school it's a little different than elementary school. We really feel like we have to hit all the frameworks that we're required to cover for the MCAS. So we're trying to build in the scientist part slowly over time. Next year we're going to be doing a lot more changes again because you're constantly changing what you do. You want to make it better, you want to make it more interesting, but exactly that's what we want to do. We want to have a scientist for every unit, really engage with the real world of science, and not old scientists too, new ones too.
Right, of course.
There's actually a lot of great resources for that too. Like all the new resources that are coming out are, we know that it's also important for people to have role models and scientists role models, and there are tons.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great resources for teachers about those role models and who they are and what they've done. And that's one of the exciting things about it too. Is
I want to go back to
the
the
range.
classes.
Well, we have
It's hard not to just follow them around all day.
You're
Tough job you got.
Well, I would say we've also been very, very supported, by the administration and by all the principals and by the team. Like, this is very much something that has been a team effort in the schools.
Supplies, had to change. There's lots of sharing with 7th grade and 8th grade and mixing up our supplies. It's a pretty big process, but we're getting there.
A lot more to come. 6th grade is this year, 7th grade is next year, 8th grade the following year. And those are the years that I think probably have the biggest content change in terms of units taught. So those teachers are, they're working on things now. Hasn't been an easy change. There's, I want to commend all the teachers for being so professional in the discussions that we had for, a full year or so. If you taught earth science for 10, 12, 15 years and all of a sudden the possibility of, all right, now we're doing integrated science, so I get a little smidge. So, there's anxiety for the teachers. Can I do this? Am I going to be interested in that material? Can I convey passion if that hasn't been my passion? So, that piece is still coming for teachers, and then it's going to be a process, but sometimes change is good and exciting and gets people moving.
Yeah. A good support team.
Yeah.
The best.
And I also want to say that you make this look so easy, and I know there's a tremendous amount of work going on behind the scenes to make it look this easy, and also with any change in science having kids be this engaged with materials, there is a cost to those materials too. And so I hope you continue to come forward with us with these projects and the things you're finding successful, and let us know what we need to continue to do to support.
We have a lot of
that in
parents who
the
donate a lot of things.
Thank you.
You might have, some people might have heard, I did a vomit lab the other day. It wasn't really vomit. But I made vomit so they could test and try to find carbohydrates and lipids. And the cafeteria provided me with a good amount of food. And the people that I eat with donated fruit and stuff, and I was pureeing it, you know. So you make do. You make do.
TMI,
I know, it's just what I do. But
Were the squirrels interested in that?
no, they just wanted that one blue, and that little blue animal cell went right up the tree with the squirrel. But you know, that's what it is. It takes a village, and between the parents and the administrators and sharing with amongst other teachers, it's really been great.
I just want to thank the school committee for funding the position for Catherine, which was one of our few asks, and got that into the budget. And also sort of grade level leaders at the elementary level and curriculum support at the middle school level for content folks to help coordinate. I think that really, Mike was kind of a lone wolf, 6 through 12 for science for a long time. And to sort of have a partner at the elementary level, I think is really important. I'd also like to remind everyone that the only improvement I can remember that we have in our budget for next year for FY19 is the science materials for grade 7, the only one. So that was, I'm glad that's still in there and that we're able to move ahead with this process. So thank everybody for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
So, to move on, it's now time for Whitby. Yay. Hey, Whitby. Thank you.
The subcommittee got back?
Subcommittee discussion got moved.
So thank you very much. Heidi Driscoll, our co-president of the board, is joining me tonight. I'm Karen Conley, and I'm happy to be here to give you this year's grants, which amount to over $100,000. And I think it's really interesting to be following. Oh, she got out of here too quickly. Catherine, because some of the grants that we are doing fall into the category of supporting those new science standards. So I just highlight a couple of ones. She had written a grant to get a new Star Lab, which is a portable, my mind just went blank.
Planetarium.
A planetarium. I wanted to say aquarium, and I'm like, that's not what it is. So WIFI first funded this more than 15 years ago. It might have been 20 years ago, and they've been using it at the middle school very faithfully. We added to it so some of the students from Lincoln would come over and use it. She has a vision for using it at all of the elementary schools, and so we decided to buy a brand new one and also to get additional cylinders. I think that's going to be great. Another thing that you'll see with these grants, and I think they fall into some interesting categories because every year I do feel like educators sort of coalesce around a couple of different themes, and one of the themes this year was related to technology. And I was very excited to see, and I think we continue to be very pleased at WIFI, that as the district takes over responsibility for things like Chromebooks or iPads, replacing teacher devices, that frees up WIFI to have the funding to do some of the more innovative things that at the moment the district is unable to afford. So the coding stations that they're going to try out at Morocco that Jen and Catherine wrote a grant for, to teach students coding not just as an end in itself, but perhaps coding as a way to help students self-regulate their behavior. Students who don't do well with saying, perhaps you need to be in a quiet place, a quiet room, but they actually need to have their hands on, do something. I think that's a very interesting approach. Catherine has worked at the elementary schools with teachers as they've tried to get their heads around what does a makerspace mean. And so now we've been able to roll that out with portable makerspaces, with increasing what they're doing at Vincent Owen. And again, all of that is because you have this district level coordinator position, and we're very happy to be able to support that. Another thing, and I will also call this grant out because Cindy Harrington was kind enough to come at Lynch Preschool. They wrote a grant called Giving Preschoolers a Voice, which is facilitating the development of communication skills for our students who really have the most struggles with communicating. Again, that's something that we're very excited to support because we know it's not in the district budget, but we think it speaks to our mission to serve all of the students in Winchester. You'll also see as you look at that, a number of grants that relate to social emotional. That's another theme that we, as you, have heard a lot about. So we did choose to support those. And, you know, some of the grants are very small. I'll call out one grant and then perhaps you have some questions, but at Lincoln School, they are just doing the coolest grant that was like $630. And it's a project between literacy and art. So they read a book, Only One You, about a little fish who's going off in the world and the words of wisdom that his parents give him. And so this was an opportunity for students to work on a literacy level with, well, what does it mean to give somebody a word of wisdom? What are some words of wisdoms you would have? Writing around that, and then they went to art, and they're painting their words of wisdom on rocks, and then they're going to install them all at the school, and it's going to be a river of wisdom. How can you hate it? For $630, how can you hate it? So those were some that I wanted to call out, perhaps also mentioning the Homegrown Reading Institute that we're partnering with the district on, which is a significant grant for us, $18,000, but it allows the district to bring the folks from New York here. So it takes what could have been $40,000 or $50,000 worth of professional development and makes it more in the range of $20,000. And we will be supporting that grant again next year at a slightly lower level, but we already have in place the plan to do funding. So those are our current grants, and I don't know if anybody has questions. Heidi, if there was any you wanted to highlight?
Would you talk about the one about the Dr. Spencer?
Yes, Project Zero. I think most of you know about Project Zero at Harvard that's been going on now for a number of years. And so Scott Spencer approached us about going and doing the summer workshop. And we've sent one other teacher there probably 5 years ago. And it seems to be an amazing workshop, and we're excited to have him go. And I think he is more than excited to go. So I know we're going to hear a lot about that when he gets back.
Gosh, you know how old Project Zero is? I was a Project Zero teacher in New Hampshire in the late 80s.
And look how successful it is. There you go.
That's right to the top.
Yeah.
These are all really exciting.
I think it was a really great grant year, to be honest. As we were working on Powered Up, I think we felt teachers were kind of holding back because they really wanted to see us fund the technology and they weren't going to ask for other things. But this year, we saw a lot of really interesting projects. We saw them from all of the schools, and I think that it speaks well, again, to when the district and WIFI collaborate, how we can get that much more done when teachers realize that they have the additional support that comes from private funding, and that helps support a budget that continues to be strained on every level.
Can I just add something from the PD piece?
Yes.
I just obviously how appreciative we are. But I just want to say how amazing this is as we're trying to get people to think about just trying things, experimenting, and that, you know, you pilot things first, but you play with it and you take risks and you put yourself out there. And as we're trying to say that with students and do that, it's just, we see more and more teachers writing a grant to be able to try those things. And we would never, as we all know, the tight budget, we would never be able to support those things. We can hardly support the core things. Frankly, I think the Cochran's thing is a core thing, which we can't support without them. So not only are they doing some of the things that are our clear central mission, but allowing us to try things so we can be good models and have that spirit ourselves of, you know, not everything has to be perfect out of the gate. You got to figure some things out. Like learning, as Catherine and Mary Beth, just learning is messy, and it should be. And that's just something we can never do. So thank you, because it's just amazing to watch these things unfold.
Well, it's very interesting. Last night, as part of our CTC speaker series at the high school that was supported this year by the Winchester Savings Bank, we had a gentleman named Jared Mizzachi, who was absolutely fascinating, and I actually only had one of these left in my car, and I'll leave it, and you can all take a look at it. But these are some of the people that we brought to the high school, to the makerspace or the CTC there. But that was exactly what he was talking about and urging kids to do, is experiment, play around with it, and tinker. And his other phrase, which harkened back to, again, the beginning of what we were talking about with Powered Up, was technology is just a tool. It's not the point. The point he was saying about himself is, I'm a storyteller, I'm a theater designer, but what I can do is enhance what I have with this technology. And I'm like, you were at some of those first meetings we went to. Because it was exactly that same approach. It's just a tool, it's not what we should focus on. And he was talking about how surprised he was that often when people have questions for him, they have these very technical questions about what program he uses. And he's like, that's not the interesting stuff. The interesting stuff is the story itself and the overarching theme of a play that he's working on. So that's been something else that we've been happy to support this year, and I hope we're able to continue next year.
And on the flip side, I'd just like to say that the variety of the grants this year makes it much easier to fundraise because we're touching every level, every school, which is much easier to talk to parents about. So the greater the grants, the easier it is to raise money to fund them. So.
And the student innovation grants have been very incredible this year as well. I know they're not reflected in this, but.
We did give, the student innovation grants, yes, you accepted a bulk number for those.
Right.
And last night we did recognize some of the students, including some middle school students who wrote a grant for the technology help desk. And what they want to do is videotape themselves explaining how people can use different apps or how they can access Google Docs, because then it'll be easier for everybody to learn. Well, that's what we were talking about, again, 3 and 4 years ago, was could we have a library that it would be easy for folks? And so now we have the middle school students providing that, which I'm not sure what the ultimate...
Student becomes the teacher.
Yeah, I don't know what that says about all of us, but... and
we completed the project.
Yeah.
I taught them well to use their resources.
Well, they're teaching all of us. So, yeah, the student innovation grants will continue next year, and we're hoping that we'll get even more. And we were really happy to see 2 elementary grants. You know, one from a student who wrote a grant about creating a buddy bench so people could be kind to each other and respect each other, which was a very cool grant. And another young man who wrote a grant for flexible furniture because he felt like he couldn't self-regulate if he didn't have some of those bouncy chairs. And wow, if he felt that way, maybe his friends did too. So again, I mean, you know, the little children should lead them. So look for more grants next year.
I wanted to, you mentioned the Buddy Bench, I wanted to thank you. It may be the smallest grant here, it may not be, but thank you very much for that. My now 9th grader was in 1st grade at Lincoln, and she was shy and lonely. And another little girl who was shy and lonely, they found each other sitting somewhere, and they're now still best friends. So it would have been lovely to have a Buddy Bench 9 years ago, but it's even lovely to have it now, and it's wonderful, and it's I mean, small grant here could make a huge difference in a child's life, huge difference, so thank you.
Well, and thank the teachers who wrote it, and again, the way that they plan to roll that out, which I think is something that is important about the grants we give, is the money doesn't just get plopped down and the project just sort of survives on its own. We were, as we spoke with the folks that wrote that grant, well, you know, how are you going to teach kids about it? Are you just going to put a bench out there? Or are you going to have an assembly? You know, and there's a whole plan around, yes, we are going to have an assembly. This is what we're going to do with the kids, so that things are actually really used to their fullest potential, because that's what's hard.
So I just have an overarching comment and then a question about one of these in particular. I will observe, and I can't remember if the last time you were here as Karen the citizen, or here on behalf of WIFI, but you were remarkably unvarnished in your assessment of our FY19 budget deliberations and where we were headed.
I was here as Karen the citizen.
And I noted that. I want to say I agreed with you completely. And if anyone followed town meeting, although we were very pleased that we got a lot of money for FY19, we still have a gap of around $85,000. And on the agenda tonight, and part of the reason why Ms. Kirby is here, we're going to talk about some job descriptions, including an out-of-district coordinator. But the town has given us less money than what we've said we need, and that's after we frankly made 2 or 3 rounds of cuts from that original vote in the end of January for FY19, which was all about what our priorities are. So you made a comment a few minutes ago about the district sort of our owning a technology replacement. And Mr. Schindelman was fond of saying that any year that we fall short, of meeting our technology replacement obligations is just more that we have to make up the next year, right? That doesn't go away. So this is just maybe a public service announcement to say, I think a lot of us heard you. I certainly agree with you. And while this is not about technology replacement, it's really important stuff. I know that we do shoulder that burden, and we have to find a way to pay for it. And it's one of many talking points around the need for an operating override. Because while it is a tool, it's really important as we rely more and more on it. My observation from Ms. Damari's presentation and others tonight was in a district where we advance with BYOD and Google Classroom, what students are really reacting to is how cool something is because it's real.
Right.
So we have a lot of technology and we're becoming really almost dependent on those tools. We gotta be sure that they work. So that's I'm getting off my soapbox on that one. But now I'm gonna have a specific question around professional development grants. And it's one I reached out to Karen about earlier today and briefly touched base with Jenna and Emma as well, and that is the mindful schools. So I might tee this up maybe more for Jen to speak to, but so this is certainly a priority of ours in the district, and some of us may remember there was some coverage in the Winchester Star, I think it was this fall, around some things we were doing at Morocco and Lynch. I believe WIFI funded for 2017 a professional development grant written by Irene Diamond for some teacher training around mindfulness and yoga in particular. So that was sort of one avenue to explore. And knowing that WIFI sort of likes to seed things that are going to kind of catch on, it strikes me that this grant is kind of going down a somewhat different path, that mindful schools, I think of it like almost like an online university, and that this funding, as I read it, sort of gets maybe 25 teachers in the door, so preliminary training, some preliminary online instruction. And from that, they then are presented with maybe a very rich sort of curriculum of online learning. But those next steps cost something. So I'm curious to know what we think that might cost, how many more teachers beyond the 25 that WIFI is funding might we sort of send down that path. And would this be, are we looking for self-starters, for teachers beyond these 25, or even these 25 who want to take these additional classes? And then Jen, would they sort of come back and look for the reimbursement from the account that we have set up for professional development, which I think you've already told us we maxed out this year, right? So I'm trying to understand how aspirationally this different path can be quantified, and are we budgeting for where this may go in FY19? Looking mostly at Jen, but.
Sure. So I probably won't remember all of your subparts, so feel free to return to some of the questions. So part of, if you remember in our wellness plan, part of what we said we wanted to do last year was really be exploring different options.
Yep.
So we did quite a few different things around the district to try some different things. Mindful Schools was one of them. And as part of our plan this year in the wellness plan, we made a decision based on all the different pieces and the data that we got from them. So mindfulness and mindful schools is really a large umbrella. And then there are different subparts under that people may do, like yoga or meditation or different pieces, mindful moments, what they're doing at the middle school in the morning with some just quiet time before the day starts. So all those can be pieces that fall under kind of that larger umbrella. Mindful Schools it's a 6-week course, the first course that we do. And it's a very comprehensive course that first teaches the teachers about mindfulness. So like we say, we would never pull someone off the street and say, have at it, go teach geometry. We're asking teachers to teach social emotional things and to deal with this very not only big topic, but difficult topic that they themselves don't always know about regulation or how to do some of those pieces or how to work through emotions. And so we found through our research over the last year of trying different things that was the most essential thing that we begin with as a district, is that everybody have those tools themselves about the bigger emotional pieces. Yoga's lovely, mindful moments are lovely, all those pieces are great, but they're really such a small part of the bigger picture around social emotional. If we don't get to those fundamental pieces, I don't think we'll really make a difference with social emotional. There'll be little add-ons. So that was really what drove our decision pedagogically about saying this is the consistent approach to go with. But also coincidentally and lovely, because this never happens, it was the most fiscally responsible. So some of the things where we brought other people in or where we're dependent on grants, some of those people charge, I don't want to say out loud, over $200 an hour, which is just no way to sustain as a district. And Mindful Schools, like we have the teachers in the 6-week course now that are, it's $60 a person for the 6 weeks. You know, it's probably 5 or 6 hours a week times 6 weeks that they're getting for $60. But in addition to which, we're building that in, so that's just the foundation to your next question. Is that enough? No, it's definitely not enough. So we're building that in now to other things we're doing. So it's a required component of our co-teaching course now. It's a required component of our, we were just teaching today, the social emotional graduate course, which we have, you know, almost 50 people in that. So they're getting that as a piece of that. And then we're doing further workshops and training through the courses and other pieces to do that. So will it cost us money? It will. But frankly, we think it's perfectly sustainable in the PD budget. So I'm not worried about the financial piece. It's interesting that you asked, will they want more? We literally had someone come up at the end of class who said, this is so amazing, can I take the next course? I'm like, you haven't started the first one yet. I said, but I understand I'm a little bit of a junkie myself. I've taken all 4 of their classes. So we will figure out ways. They can always use their reimbursement account if they choose, which we would find that so much more valuable than the one day sit and gets where they go somewhere. Plus they're out of the class for that day, so we would rather they use the funding this way anyway. So that will be one avenue, but as you said, that's a cap and we have to be careful of that piece, but we'll also be able to fund some through the PD budget. And if we have to seek some outside grants because people are so excited and want to do more, well, that's a good problem to have. I'll figure that out then. Sorry, did I answer all the pieces?
Well, you did, but and then the last one I want to throw at you is I understand. So some of what they offer is available. You can sort of get the education credits.
Yeah.
But my sense is that that's almost like I'm going to say add-on, and that's probably not the right way to say it. But there may be some content you can access, but you can also access it and then get these education credits. There may be some additional cost for that. So I'm just curious to know, sort of, I think of the curriculum as the PD piece. What's really important is what can our teachers and staff learn, because that's what's directly going to impact students. Yeah. It's a separate, almost very personal issue to the person about whether they're getting educational credits and how that should be paid for. So I don't want to take it too far into the weeds,
okay.
but
So those are graduate
the more I looked
credits.
at it, the more I realized that the cost for this was even sort of, it was hard for me to get sort of a handle on about where it goes. Totally support this, by the way, in the grant and the initiative behind it. I'm just trying to figure out if we're sort of going down a path that we have to be kind of mindful of in terms of how we budget.
So those would be, if you, with Mindful Schools, after you've done the coursework and when you're implementing your practices, you can then apply for graduate credits through your implementation, and there's further work you need to do with them then to get those. But they would do that through their tuition account, which is capped for their personal, so they would do that instead of a course at, say, UMass Boston or Buffalo or something. So that would be a choice about that piece. But certainly, I mean, I haven't done any of the graduate credit work, and I can honestly say it's been an unbelievably valuable experience just doing the course stuff. I think Ellen's nodding because she did one too. She was part of the pilot.
George and I were in the same cohort.
We've tried it out.
It was an amazing experience that I found very, very, very valuable. I did it last summer.
I just have a really quick follow-up.
Sure.
I swear. Is this something where eventually we can, they'll have teachers be trainers and not rely on like, is this, you know, like become experts in it and then?
So we will definitely, and in fact, we have already bargained and traded with some people who wanted to take the courses, that we would pay their $60 to take the course if they would give us free PD next year.
Okay.
To others. So certainly, we will still always use them because, again, they're experts, so we want to tap, and they work with schools across the country, they have much more data and background than we do, but certainly, it's never enough by itself, and we want people in district that will keep it alive, provide PD, and some people don't want to do the whole 6-week course, but we want them to have some PD around it so that they can have that from the other teachers.
Great.
Thank you.
Can I make the motion? Yeah. Move to accept with gratitude the professional development and education grants from WFCP totaling $100,700.
Second.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. First installment.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
Can I just say a quick public thank you to Whitney?
Yes, please come up, you've been waiting all this time.
I was gonna say, for a preschool teacher, to be awake at 9 o'clock at night, it's very impressive.
Go back to Lynch and wake up there in the morning.
I'm so sorry. That's okay. This was my first school committee meeting, so I wasn't sure if I was supposed to speak earlier or wait till the grants had been awarded. But my name is Cindy Harrington. I'm a speech and language pathologist with the Winchester Integrated Preschool Program. I'm based at Lynch, but we have 2 classrooms at VO. And we are so excited and so grateful to WIFI for funding our Voice Output Communication Aid grants this year. We will be purchasing a variety of different programmable voice output devices that will help not only our nonverbal students and minimally verbal students, but also students who are learning English and students who may be struggling with some anxiety and reluctant to participate in the whole group. Our teaching team is over the moon that this was accepted. We are really thrilled, and thank you so much.
When people are that excited, you know it's gonna work.
Can't wait to hear about how to use it.
Thanks, I'm excited to come back and share.
So, do you want to perhaps do the overnight trip and then the handbook?
Sounds good. Sure. This should be quick.
As a timing decision?
Good evening, everyone. With me tonight is veteran chaperone of the Washington DC trip and veteran planner, coordinator of the Washington DC trip, Kenny Tully. Before you have a one-page doc with a link to a website, trying to save trees, regarding the Washington DC trip. We're humbly asking that we be allowed to continue to plan the trip for next year. The dates of said trip are March 25th through 29th, 2019. The trip coordinators are now seasoned veterans, Kenny Tully, Grace Tripp, and Pat DeVries. They work like a well-oiled machine. World Strides will continue to be our company. We will continue to take coach buses. Full refunds will continue to be available. There's absolutely scholarships available to any and all families. And I've already worked with several families to award those. And they're so gracious, and my responses are, of course, we're more than happy to help you out. We wouldn't do this trip otherwise. Yeah, I guess that's it. Happy to answer any questions related to it.
Can I ask for, I don't know if I should ask you up there, but I would like to hear from the kids, like a survey asking them how they feel about this trip. It seems like a very expensive trip and it's so supported, but I've also heard some concerns. So I just want to know, how do the kids feel about it? What kind of educational experience are they getting?
Concerns from kids who attended the trip or didn't attend the trip? Did. We certainly survey the students who attend the trip. We ask them different questions about what parts they liked, what parts they didn't like, and the trip coordinators use that information to make modifications and tweaks and edits every year. I'll be honest with you, I'm not surprised how many kids we take this year.
There are 360 kids in the 8th grade, I think we took 338.
338 of 338 students. I wouldn't be surprised if a few or more didn't have a wonderful experience for a variety of reasons, but we're always trying to ensure that everyone's experience is as wonderful as it can be, and we can continue to solicit feedback and share that, and get that input from the kids and then share that with you, so you have some student data, not just staff data. Because staff report the same thing. We're exhausted, we don't sleep, and
this year it rained a lot.
Yeah.
And snowed.
Yes. And they didn't meet any royalty this year. I was a little disappointed about that.
I don't know, where was Prince Charles? He was
Yeah.
busy planning the wedding.
What a line. Aren't you supposed to be in school?
Yeah.
I will confirm as a former attendee with Mr. Tully 30-something years ago, and as a parent of somebody who attended, it was, and I presume again will be, an amazing experience. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember going to the White House. I don't know if you still can do that these days. I remember.
We just walk around, we don't go in, it's too much of a hassle.
I remember such an educational experience for somebody who had never been to DC. I mean, you live your whole life, and 500 miles, is it even that to DC, and have never been there, so it was, I think most of the people on the trip had not been as well. So same for my kids and my child and their friends, so amazing experience.
And since I've been on the school committee, I have noted that you all do make changes in the trip itinerary, and a lot of that's based on student feedback. And also in some instances, you give some kids some options about where they.
We do.
So it's not, this is the itinerary based on last year's group, but what they said, they have some choices during the trip as well.
We have one night of choice. This year, the choices were you could go to the Wax Museum, you could go to the Spy Museum. I don't know if you've been to the Spy Museum, but.
Oh, it's amazing.
Huh?
It's amazing.
It is great. Or they could have gone to Ford's Theater where there was a play, which I'm trying to remember. I didn't go. I went to the Wax Museum. So they do have choices. Having had my own children go through the school system, I'm always amazed that we can do this trip as cheaply as we can.
Agreed.
When you get to the high school and you see what some of the other trips are, this is all their expenses, hotel, all their admission tickets, all their meals. They can go with no money in their pocket. And
it's actually a little cheaper than a lot of other districts because of the volume that we're able to take, because our classes are so large. We take a lot of students, which brings down the price.
World Strides is the biggest, well, not most, but a lot of the schools all over the country, this is kind of a ritual trip in our society. And World Strides is the biggest tour company, and we're now their biggest client. We take either 8 or 9 coach buses. We rent 100 and something rooms for a week at a hotel. So that's why we need to start now. This isn't, let's throw the kids in the car and go to the Cape for the weekend. This is like a military operation. You don't show up at a restaurant with 400 people, unannounced. Everything has to be planned out. All the kids, who have eating issues and food issues, that all has to be planned out ahead of time. And all the food has to be, We even now, with new transportation rules, we have to pre-position drivers in Philadelphia on the way down and on the way back in Connecticut, because they can only drive or be in the seat so many hours for federal law. So, the amount of coordination that goes into running this trip.
Our teachers used to just drive the buses in the 70s. They don't allow that anymore. And since we're on TV, I just want to say I'm kidding. For those of you at home, you're now awake.
I will tell you, I know you're new to the school committee, we jokingly say, we have a motto for our trip, and you've heard this before. 350 14-year-olds staying in a hotel for a week, no parents around, what could go wrong?
Well, and it's true, you also plan the week for the kids who
The
don't go.
Boston-based, we call that the week of Boston-based trips, and that has undergone so many changes based on student feedback and what they were interested in, what worked well, what didn't, and it was a really fun experience for the kids. I would say 18 to 25.
350 to 380 kids. And it's not money. We don't know anything about scholarship. We don't know who has it. He handles all of it. So money is never an issue.
I don't know about that.
For scholarship.
Oh, for scholarships, yeah, that's right.
You're just saying there's a firewall there.
Yeah.
And also, if it is an issue, we have that new AIDA scholarship if you run into anything, so.
But there are eligibility requirements too for this, right? So students are expected to be behaving, right? Prior to the trip. There are occasions when students don't go because of some consequence to something that's happened, and that's not necessarily inappropriate. And there have been times when kids have acted inappropriately on the trip, and they come home early.
Yep.
So you guys are serious about that.
Yeah, and again, in my time at McCall, the years I began, there was instances of that. Not so much anymore. We really, we really work to build success for our kids and make sure that they can access this. And we want to do everything we can to make sure no one's ever denied anything for any reason, and just build that success for them as best we can.
So you're looking for us to approve this now so you can continue to plan?
Yes, please,
Very
and thank you.
large, elaborate.
So I'm happy to make a motion to approve the overnight trip to Washington DC for our 8th graders to take place March 25th through 29th next school year, provided all necessary paperwork is in order, and that Dr. Evans has authority to cancel the trip in events of adverse world circumstances.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kenny.
Thanks for your patience.
So you want to do the other field trip quickly?
Yes.
Dennis, you might have questions on this one. I don't know if you want to come up. You're going to do handbooks right after this.
Yeah, thank you. Very safe.
So the next field trip, approval field study is not an overnight trip, just a late night trip. On June 8th, students are traveling to Music in the Parks in Bristol, Connecticut, leaving at 8 a.m., returning at 10 p.m. Students will compete at a music festival adjudicated by 3 college-level professors in the field of music. And those professors will give the ensemble ratings and rankings with other participating schools and provide invaluable feedback about the quality of singing and provide helpful comments. After the performance, students will enjoy time at Link Conference. And later that day, all schools will meet for the awards ceremony, returning to Winchester after this time. So this is Mr. Buford.
I think they've made the trip before, haven't they?
Mm-hmm.
No.
So it sounds like fun and
Fun and learning. Need a motion?
One question about that. Will any graduated seniors be attending that trip, do you know?
That's a good question. It's still up for discussion. I would err on the side of not allowing graduates to go. They're no longer members of the community. At the high school, they're obviously members of the community of Winchester, but it's hard to represent the school if you've already moved on.
Okay.
So that's our preference right now.
I could have a motion.
I move to approve a late night trip to Lake Connecticut on June 8th, 2018.
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. So we have some handbooks.
So do you want the good news on the handbooks?
Sure.
The good news is there are no major changes to the elementary handbook, so we have no presentation on it this evening. It's just sort of dates and names and those sorts of things. So.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not up against some kind of printing schedule either, or deadline.
Middle of June is when you really want to get the handbook sent to the publisher so that they can have them back 2 weeks before school starts. If you order at the end of June, sometimes they don't arrive when school starts.
Okay.
We don't print the handbook at the high school, it's all online.
Okay. All right.
We still give agenda planners, so therefore it's part of the agenda planners. If we stop giving agenda planners, we would no longer have to really print handbooks, or we could just talk about it. But we still do.
We give agenda planners, but only to the freshmen and sophomores, and we cut the handbook out to save $2,000.
A lot of our students use.
Use the phone. Maybe due to the great experience of having a physical agenda planner at the middle school level, if they are able to then move on and graduate.
They're not using the agenda planners as much anymore either. We have to watch that because a lot's being done on technology now. So it might be something we don't have to do anymore.
Whatever the platform is, my kids learn to manage their schedules very well at those agenda planners.
So it's helpful to know we're not under the gun schedule-wise,
Yeah.
because a lot of this is really policy and our practice and our policy, actually. It's that we have a couple of readings of policy, we frequently look at edited handbooks, you know, there's Q&A with you all, and then only if there are follow-up questions do we need the principals to come back. So we sort of focus on the meat of what the changes are.
So the action recommended is still none at this time, we're not voting?
I
It
would
said
prefer to do
voting
that.
on the agenda.
I know, it
That's
says
why I was
different things in different places. If you guys are comfortable, you know, I would really rather we just, you know, hear the presentation, read it over, and vote next time.
But we can ask questions.
Yes. So do you want to start with the high school?
Sure. Last year we came to you and made a number of changes. We added different things to the chemical health policy and some of the wording as well throughout the handbook. This year is a much smaller draft. We're still working through what's working, what needs to evolve. So
some very small changes. Obviously, I changed the address at the start of the handbook. That'll be tweaked somewhat. Still working on that, but we changed the start time. Of course, that's important to have there. And then really just working on a little bit of the chemical health policy, just deciding we need a follow-up procedure. We don't have too many violations, but part of the struggle we found this year was getting the students for that 6 hours of working with usually Martha McDonough in terms of just an educational component. There's a bit of chasing going on, and we're trying to figure out how to get the students to get there on time and fulfill their commitment. For the most part, it went totally fine, but we are seeing some loopholes, so we're working on buttoning that up a little bit. Haven't come up with the words yet, but I'm acknowledging that that's something that we're working on. We updated the cell phone policy, or we're looking to, just to make it just more current. Previously, it said that cell phones weren't allowed to be used in the hallways, and that's sort of long gone at this point. So now it's really just at teacher discretion, which is a blanket statement, and then we're saying that you can use it during lunch and before and after school. Previously, we had the exact hours of the school day, and now we're just saying it's before and after school, so it's obviously understood. And really, what it comes down to is that it's teacher discretion. Some classes will allow them, some classes use them as learning tools, some classes won't allow them at all, and we honor the teachers and what they would like to do. Our grade chart, one of the requests was to add the 10th and 100th point to make sure that it was absolutely clear. So all we added was the .99, every single one. Attendance is, nothing has really changed there. We're just clearing up the difference between absent excused and absent notified. 99% of our population, this isn't an issue, but some people get confused about calling in and they say, my student's not coming into school today. It's my daughter, Susan is unable to attend school today, click. And that's actually not allowed by the state of Massachusetts. It has to fall under the 7 or 8 guidelines. And so we will put in absent notified. Thank you very much. We know that you're responsible, that you've acknowledged that your student's not coming in, but it's not an excused absence because it has to fall under these categories. And so we're just making sure that that's absolutely clear. Again, it doesn't really play much of a role. It does play a bit of a role with the seniors when they're looking to be absolved from senior exams, but nothing has changed over the years. It's the exact same policy. We're just trying to write it in a more airtight way. Okay. And then the last thing is just that with the exchange trips and field trips, we had a rule in there that it was never really followed up on. If you went on an exchange trip, so say you went to Spain for 15 days, the policy was written that you were unable to attend any other field trip for the remainder of the school year. I thought that was a little draconian. We could discuss maybe not going on another field trip for the rest of the quarter, but realistically, students are going on field trips and it has never really been enforced in the recent years, so let's take that out and just say that the administration or teachers reserve the right to keep a student from going on a field trip for any number of reasons, just giving us that flexibility. That if a student has been out quite a bit, if they've gone on multiple band trips and the exchange trip, then maybe they're going to sit out one of these field trips. I believe in learning beyond the classroom. I love field trips. Most of the faculty does as well, but you could miss quite a bit of school depending on the classes that you're taking, and sometimes being in that seat is important. So it also creates a lot of makeup work for teachers to do. If the kid's been out for 15 days and then goes on another trip or another two-day overnight for what have you, it creates a lot of makeup work on the faculty side as well. So we want the ability to say, maybe we slow down on a few of these.
So you can do it on a case-by-case basis.
Right, and it would probably be very rare as well.
Okay.
That's it. Just some little tweaks and cleanups.
That's it. Anybody have a question?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I actually communicated with you about this to some extent, the clarification of what an absent notified means. And I understand that there's no actual change in how it's taking place, but the way it's being written down in the handbook is different. And at least the way I read it on what is our page 39, but it says AN or an A are considered unexcused absences or class cuts. I get that apparently there's no change, but then it does specifically lay out the disciplinary actions for class cuts. So someone who is reading this, who is a lawyer maybe, might say, someone who gets an absent notified, has technically cut class, and technically should have these disciplinary actions take place. I assume that's not happening.
It's rare that somebody requests discipline.
But it's spelled out that that's what should take place. So I'm just confused as from a policy standpoint, as Chris mentioned, if we have a policy that says that if someone is absent and notified that they're a class cut and this is the disciplinary action, if someone gets disciplined for that and someone else does not get disciplined for that, there might be a question of why is there a different discipline for these same infractions? So I'm just trying to understand where that
So the absent notified, nobody gets disciplined for.
Okay.
Not in the 2 years that I've been here, and I've never heard of it being an issue before. The class cut it's a clear violation of a student who was in the building, it did not attend that period, or didn't show up for multiple periods. And that's notified by the teachers. The absent notified is an administrative process, so that comes into the main office. A class cut is a teacher telling the administration, this student has cut my class, and that's where the discipline comes in.
So maybe some clarification on the language, to separate the two more clearly would be helpful. Right, that's just, so people don't think that if a parent chooses to keep a child home for the day, and it doesn't fit under one of your these states' seven categories, that child is then gonna have detention for that.
I would agree, because I think the way it's written is not only, I'm going to take a step beyond and say it's not really just confusing. I think it might be a little misleading, because it suggests to me some equivalency between AM and a class cut, for which there could be some punitive consequences.
We'll define class cut.
Yeah. I also wanted to offer, if I may, Susan, just on the same subject, a parent emailing, calling, or writing a note for an absent student that does not follow Massachusetts school attendance laws will be absence. Yes. So I got it out in my book. And I have not been able to find yet the statute that tells me what my obligation is. Interestingly, and I should say this because it came up during public comment tonight, when George was at the McCall Parents Association meeting and talking about the sort of burdensome communication requirements, I want to be very clear, I don't think you were communicating that anything you're doing at McCall is burdensome. You were making a point that state law requires schools to notify parents when a student hasn't shown up for
3 days without any kind of call.
3 days. George's point was, we don't wait 3 days. We wait a couple hours, where's that kid we're calling home? So I just thought maybe for the record, to be clear about at least how I interpreted that remark.
Are those 2014?
You haven't given me my new book, Judy. I don't throw it away till I get the new one from you. The point I was going to make is there are many chapters and sections that apply to this. So if there's something, I'm thinking to the layperson, how do I know exactly what that means?
Take them maybe to the DESI side or something.
Or if you could just be clear about what it is you're looking for, would be helpful.
Maybe Dennis and Judy could look into.
Sure.
Yeah, let's go back to the,
Chapter 71 usually covers, but it doesn't cover the parent responsibility. Chapter 1 is the school responsibility. This is what we can expect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interestingly, Massachusetts was the first state to require kids to come to public school. In 1862, Mississippi was the last in 1918.
Good to know.
Fun facts for our next meeting.
and who's leading the nation in achievement?
I wasn't, someone's connecting some dots. Back then, you had to go to school for a minimum of 3 days a week.
That's a great schedule.
Some things have changed, I just thought I would.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Jen.
Did you have anything else?
I wanted to ask,
Okay. Go ahead.
for exchange trip, field trip, I was wondering why it isn't left to the discretion of parents and kids to decide the field trip quantity, the exchange. I was just thinking, why is it the discretion of the staff or administration? Why not?
Because the amount of instruction time they're losing. It really shouldn't rely on the experts to say you've lost this much instruction time versus what you could have attended and we'd like you to be in school here.
So I flagged, that was the other thing I flagged in this. I have a concern about that because it feels just broad to me, Dennis.
It's broad on purpose. It allows us flexibility.
And it used to be a blanket prohibition, so maybe that's how the blanket prohibition came into being. It's like, well, we don't want to have to argue about this.
So
It's just not allowed, which seems wrong. So I'm not sure where you draw the, how you compromise on that.
I think, may I make a suggestion, is I wonder if the or staff needs to be there. That if you've got the discretion of high school administration there, you have a staff member that has a concern, they bring it to you, and there's a conversation that has to take place. Maybe I feel a little more comfortable about that, because to me, the staff is anyone who works in the building, just decides that kid's not going on the trip. And that could be a difficult conversation, and probably something, therefore, you would find yourself wrapped into anyway with a difficult phone call or something.
I would need an example of how that would play out in real life.
I don't know.
A teacher would tell me this kid's missed 15 of my classes in the past month, and their grade is falling behind. Can you support me in saying this? I wouldn't know the student's attendance on how many field trips they've gone through. 1,400 kids. So it would only come from a teacher. And more likely, the teacher A would speak to teacher B first and say, hey, this student has missed X number of classes and their grade is really suffering, or they've come in class, and I'd like them to attend.
Isn't it up to the student of what grade to earn?
So I'm sorry if I'm coming.
That's a philosophical thing.
That is a philosophical question. Yeah.
That's a philosophical question. I think that the teachers are trying to send a signal to students if they've missed, not only often students are out for a variety of reasons, especially juniors and seniors. And I think what they're trying to help students do is make better choices to attend or not attend a class. So there are lots and lots of opportunities for our kids to leave the building, and we think that's great. But sometimes kids are out a lot and it has a serious impact on their grades. And so maybe, Dennis, you could take another look at this and say that teachers will advise students about whether it's appropriate to go on a field trip. But I don't think any teacher's going to say, you absolutely can't go to the art museum Thursday because you've missed too much school.
But that's exactly what
That's
this
what it
language
does
would
say.
permit. That's
Right.
Brian's point.
Right, and it does permit that, but I think in practice, students are more often discouraged from attending when they, when their name appears on a list and the teacher says, wow, you've missed 15 days out of the last 20. So I agree, but I think what Dennis has done is he has made it way less strict in this version. And maybe what we do is we see how it plays out for a year. And then the next year we can say, well, we just leave it to the discretion of the student.
Historically, it was written, if you went to Spain this year, you were done in January on any field trip.
And that was simple and no discussion.
Kids knew that in advance before they went to
And
school.
if you've got a kid who's
Maybe
got
just-
straight A's and able to be out, and it might not be such a big deal.
It's not a big deal. Philosophically, students should be allowed to decide what grades they want, but we're the adults of the building and we're trying to educate them on how to make good choices and guide them into saying, maybe this isn't a good choice.
And there are, the way that the high school schedule works, they're not going to the same classes every day, and they might be missing math a lot and not missing there are a couple of courses, and they're keeping up fine in the ones that they're not missing, and they're thinking, why am I not getting an A in the other two? Because I'm doing fine, but they missed the courses that they missed because of the various absences and field trips. So it gets complex, and it deserves a conversation, I think.
I'm just here to ask a question.
Yeah, no, that's a good
Not here to
question.
advise.
But Susan, I agree with everything you just said. I just feel like if that conversation is happening inside the school walls, can it involve, and it doesn't specifically say principal. To me, if WHS administration is a little more global, could that be a director? Could that be a, Tom Haver if there's a math concern? Could it be Anna Taroni if it's a foreign language concern or something like that? Just to ensure that the conversation is happening is kind of where I'm coming from.
We'll bring it up. Come back with a tweet.
I would just point out that it says may. I think it's a pretty soft, student attendance may be subject to review. Student attendance on field trips may be denied at the discretion. And so I think.
It's not a contract too, it's not like at the reasonable discretion of we're assuming that these people are professionals and care about students and would be reasonable with them.
Right. I mean, I think, that attendance is a difficult issue because philosophically,
I think that we shouldn't be as tight on attendance if students are doing well.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be an issue. But the state requires us to monitor it very closely because unlike other communities, our kids can miss a lot of school and they work hard to make it up, which places a big burden on teachers to come after school and help them and, you know, provide extra work and kind of track all of that. But the state is now doubling down on the impact of attendance. And you might remember that sometimes we've slipped to level 2 status in some districts just solely based on not meeting our attendance goals. And now the new accountability measures is double counting attendance. And if you don't meet your goal, you're going to face an impact as a district in terms of sanctions on accountability. Because they're very concerned about places where kids miss a lot of school and don't achieve at the levels that they're supposed to. So there's no differentiation for districts like Winchester where our kids are pretty conscientious even if they miss a number of days. So the high school is walking that line to try to encourage a strong attendance for a variety of reasons and to meet our state target in terms of, we have a very significant percentage of the students are what the state would label chronically absent, and a very high percentage, like over 10 days per year. And so that's a concern, not so much at the elementary.
Not field trips.
But,
No.
But in many cases though, for some underlying issues, yes?
Why are all those students missing so much school? A lot of it's family
Not quite what I asked,
vacations.
but okay.
Is that what you're missing? Is that what you're asking? Yeah.
Vaguely, that's what I'm asking.
Sometimes it's
Yeah.
social emotional
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
That's not medical.
Okay.
That's not excused medical. That's kind of that's absences for a variety of reasons. But we have a lot of kids, and I can come back with the percentages and show you. You know, average daily attendance at the elementary schools is like 95%, and the higher up you get, the more like hovers around 90%. And so
It'd be
it's
interesting if you look at that, because I think you shared that with the school committee in your first year.
yeah.
And it's
If you
kind of
look at the
eye-opening.
I mean, it's posted on the DESE website. It's probably 2017 data, but if you look at the students attendance tab on the profile page, for Winchester High School, you'll see what percentage of our kids are absent 10 days or more, 20 days or more, and it's a pretty high percentage. And so I don't want to talk out both sides of my mouth on this issue, because I really think that attendance, if it doesn't have an impact on your learning, then we're doing something wrong, because the kids should want to be there like we saw on the slides from science.
Right.
But kids miss school for a wide variety of reasons, and so trying to balance all of those things is important.
Can I ask just Dennis one last question, based on your experience at another WHS? Are our families pretty good about communicating to the office when kids are not going to be
I
present?
think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I wouldn't compare the two, but it's rare that somebody doesn't call us.
Okay.
You know, we don't chase too much.
That's a safety issue.
But one of the differences would be like, we're going to Israel for a week, see ya. That's not okay. But if we can roll that into a learning or college visit, then we can talk about it. But taking a week and a half off because it's convenient, it's not allowed by the state.
Especially if it's right before finals. You haven't had that happen before, have you, George?
Every year.
Anything else in high school?
So, middle school.
Hi. So we've updated the middle school handbook slightly every single year. There's things that you read and you say, wow, how archaic is this? How has this been in there this long? And it's a matter of, it's time to tackle that now. It's time to tackle that now. And to be perfectly honest, the way our personal appearance policy was worded was very gender biased. And it didn't really speak to what we believe, which is valuing all students and valuing the work of our educators and valuing the time on learning that they have. And our personal appearance policy hasn't necessarily been enforced to the letter by which it's been written by all staff. So it hasn't been enforced consistently because, I'll be honest, most staff in the building say, oh, come on, what's the big deal? It's not distracting, it's not disrupting, forget distracting, it's not disrupting the learning environment, so let's learn, let's do our jobs. But then, the handbook says this, so therefore I must report, therefore I must refer this student to an administrator, and then there's those conversations. And I have deep regrets that any child has ever been made to feel less than, shamed for what they chose to wear, what their parents allowed them to wear, and frankly what they wore that shouldn't ever be a big deal in a school. So this conversation to change the handbook, or this section of the handbook was, I don't know, maybe 4 weeks ago. And I thought to myself, this isn't how I operate. I operate by bringing together people and we chat and we dialogue. I don't know if we can do this, but we had to. So we had a working meeting of school council members and others, and we had a school council meeting last Monday. And in what I feel like was record time, we have put forth a recommendation for an updated personal appearance policy that is, in my opinion, drastically different from our previous policy. Is it perfect? No. Will it need some adjusting and tweaking along the way? I hope so, because that's what we should be doing, is constantly re-examining, looking at things. This is a change, and it will have to be presented to the staff and reviewed with the staff to ensure that we are following it the way it should be followed, and no child should ever be made to feel less than for a personal appearance choice, and no child should be missing out on instruction because of that as well. So we have work to do. There's no question about it. I'd also, because I'm on TV right now, also just ask and remind parents to contact school personnel. I know the Winchester residence page exists, and I know people use it. I don't look at it. So that's not how I'm going to receive information. So please, I encourage you to reach out to McCall staff when you have concerns so we can address it. And we have, I think we have a record in the last 7 years that I can speak to of addressing concerns as they arise and trying to do right by the kids in this community to the best of our abilities. So what you have here, just two proposed changes. One I didn't mention, which is you have to update the names in the handbook. So I updated the names. 7:30 isn't our start time, so I had to change that. So those little things, I didn't even mention that. And then some other staffing names will be changed as they're hired, of course. And then the second change, talking about collaboration and working together, we spent a good number of staff meetings this year on PD. So there's some administrivia stuff we still have to do. So at the June staff meeting, members of the McCall staff have proposed different ways to add those 7 minutes of instructional time. And I got this idea from my mentor, Dennis Mahoney, and they proposed different ideas. We're going to present at the staff meeting, and we're going to vote and see how staff want to use those 7 minutes. So the last pages of the handbook that just give students and parents a copy of our schedule, that's not done yet because we don't know where those 7 minutes are going to be. So, but that'll be lickety-split, done in no time. We just have to have that staff meeting and that vote. So second week of June, we're all set. So that's the second change that I just don't have for you. The big change is the personal appearance policy, and it's here for you. We put in the beginning a statement of understanding, trying to exude and share that students should be able to be themselves through their choices regarding personal appearance policy. And those words distracting that appeared in the last personal appearance policy don't appear here, because I agree. What do you mean you're distracted? What are you looking at? Focus on your work. So that's not anyone's responsibility to make sure someone else isn't distracted by that. It's your responsibility to focus and stay attuned and attentive to the instruction. So this is the policy. In the opening paragraph, we tried to include so very much. And I just want to draw your attention to that last sentence, that we were trying to capture everything we could, almost like a non-discrimination policy. As middle school students navigate this important phase in their lives, the personal appearance policy will serve as a guide to ensure a safe, inclusive, and welcoming school environment that respects one another's gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, cultural observance, socioeconomic status, and body type and size. Regardless of who you are and how you choose to dress, you should be respected, and no one should give you a hard time. So that's what we're trying to capture. Did we say too much? Are we trying to be too inclusive? I don't know, but we're really trying to make a bold effort to make this right. And then it goes on. And I did text Pam Kremens and Janine LeBoy during this meeting to say, have we ever given a kid a detention for a bra strap showing? And they emphatically say no. And I've never heard of that. So I just want to go on record as saying that too. Because this isn't a disciplinary thing, the personal appearance policy. Personal appearance policy is more about having a conversation with students. Hey, why'd you choose to wear that shirt that's advertising beer? Let's talk about that, you know, and let's talk to your parents about that. That's really what the personal appearance policy is all about.
Well, I'm glad you sort of flagged that sentence, because it
Yeah.
kind of leapt out at me as not a bad thing, but something that might be better in a different place. And the school committee voted to include and adopt the human rights statement, the town human rights statement, which just sort of tracks. And I think the human rights statement is right on the front, right at the beginning of our website. I think it's in the high school handbook.
It is.
And maybe I was looking at too many handbooks and, I just couldn't find it. I didn't see where it had been put into the McCall handbook, and I thought maybe if it's
Is it
right
on
in
the
the
cover
front,
page
is
right
that
here?
the very, very top? Maybe I was looking at my old copy or something.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I don't think it is. I think
No?
it's a different mission statement.
It says Winchester Human Rights Statement.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed it. It's right there at the top.
Very
It's
top.
Added a couple of years ago, I think.
It's so visible, okay. Because what you were working with before, and I thought you were trying, to sort of update and revise, is the first sentence of the existing one, that the personal appearance should reflect the values and expectations of McCall Middle School. I thought, if that's what this paragraph basically says, only in a more up-to-date way, in a more inclusive way, then you wouldn't have to repeat all of the categories if you maybe refer to the human rights statement, or if it was clearer to people that the human rights statement is part of the, part of the values of McCall. And you could just end that sentence with the phrase welcoming school environment.
In welcoming school environment that ensures the equal treatment and opportunity to all individuals, period. And then the individuals are defined here.
Yeah, that's what I thought might help you, work with that sentence and be more comfortable with that sentence. Again, I realize that you and the school council probably wordsmith this pretty carefully, so I didn't know that. But that.
There's no such thing as a final draft when it comes to writing,
I know. So that was what occurred to me, and then I couldn't find the human rights statement, but it was so obvious.
It's like, where are my glasses?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that the calling it out here again is an effort to let kids know, for example, religion, that it's okay to wear a burqa, that it's okay to not dress in the gender you were born into. And I think it's kind of really important to, again, reinforce that. Double down on it.
Yeah.
Maybe it should match the phrasing of the human rights statement. Though I'm looking at it now. Make sure that we cover the same ground in case this covers something that doesn't include something that's in the human rights statement. We want to make sure we have the same term.
Did you pull it up?
I did.
And maybe body type size is one of the things you want to talk about here. I don't know. That just occurred to me.
Yeah. And again, we use that NOW model out of Oregon quite a bit.
Yep.
We looked at that,
Can I offer an observation?
Please.
So there are 5 paragraphs here. Only 2 of them are the policy. It's paragraphs 3 and 4. stuff that comes before is good, sort of explanatory. And the piece at the bottom is important about, this pledge to review. As I went back and I looked at what you currently have, I'm going back to page 33 in our handout. In bold, it just says personal appearance. And it struck me that however this evolves, Susan, that perhaps where in your proposal, George, it says personal appearance policy, that just might say personal appearance. And then when we get down to where paragraph 3 starts, you say, that's the personal appearance policy. Because we're talking about why the policy is important and how we encourage students and parents to be familiar with the policy, but we haven't gotten to the policy yet. And that might make it a little easier because I'm hearing there's some good aspirational stuff at the top. That's not really policy, but it's not bad. However, it ultimately bakes. And if that makes sense and is worthwhile, I might even suggest perhaps you just combine paragraphs 3 and 4. It's not that lengthy. It's all there. I think that's your policy. It's paragraph 3 and 4.
It is.
And then I just had an open question to the comment that was made during public comment, and comparing it back to what we currently have in the handbook. So there is this issue in the current handbook. So when there is an infraction, right, when there is a concern, even though we're really kind of reframing what is appropriate, what's not, and how we would address if there are concerns. You spoke very eloquently to that at the PA meeting last week, George. Is it not appropriate for there to be something in here to clarify about what does happen if there's a concern? Parents, are they contacted? Are they called? There's sort of this
It's a case by case, and the same with discipline, to be perfectly honest with you. You can reprimand a student, redirect a student, and you're not gonna call the parent. But then there's, for more serious things, you are. A conversation with a child to gain a deeper understanding, that doesn't always involve calling the parent. Concerns, we call the parent, for sure. It could be a concern related to something so benign, but the child was visibly upset or concerned. Oh, we're calling the parent. Yeah, this touched a nerve, and I wasn't really gonna. So to say we're gonna call the parent for everything and anything, I don't know.
And I'm not saying you should.
Yeah,
I'm just saying I
but I'm
recognize
saying, I don't know.
that seemed like a legitimate question.
Yeah.
And could you maybe just share for the committee, George, what you shared with the PA last week in terms of how it's not about encouraging teachers to engage directly with students? I understand that you're saying if a teacher has a concern, they should go to you, Ms. Lavoie, other staff.
So just like with observations and giving teachers consistent feedback according to the rubric, we do calibrated walkthroughs where evaluators will observe the same lesson, talk, and share the feedback, so we're getting closer to providing similar feedback and looking at similar things. When you have so many adults in the building all looking at a policy or a personal appearance guidelines and trying to interpret it as they would, there's going to be variation there. And just like, a child walks by me with a hat and I don't say anything, they tell, oh no, Mr. Gonzalez said I could wear it. He didn't stop me, so therefore he gave me permission. And then the next teacher's telling them to take off the hat, and now confusion. So after Facebook, quote unquote, blew up regarding this topic, Janine Lavoie and Pam Cremens emailed the entire staff and said, do not talk to any students about anything related to personal appearance. If you have any questions or concerns, text, email, or call us. We will check it out, just like organically, walk by the class, whatever, and we'll tell you, I don't know what you're concerned about, everything's fine, let it go, or, oh yeah, that is an advertisement for Mexican beer, I'll take care of that later, I'll see him at lunch, we'll talk about it. So that's how we put a real quick stopgap too. Let's not have side conversations or people trying to interpret it.
Or calling out a student in a classroom.
Absolutely not. Calling out a student in a classroom, absolutely, yeah.
So I think the concern comes in with parents and students, and people are referencing Facebook, and I realize that is the most current issue, but I believe girls in the last couple of years have staged protests at the school, the current 9th grade girls. stage a protest at the school against the personal parents policy. Not at the high school, but while they were at the middle school.
I don't remember a protest. I remember 3 girls wanting to talk to Miss Lavoy about, the tops and what can be worn. I remember that.
And
I remember
the concern is that within the community, is that when the parents aren't notified, when the kids are pulled in and talked to about their bra strap, or when the kids are pulled in or asked to change their clothes and it's embarrassing to the kids and the parents aren't notified, there's no data. There's no information to be able to identify whether girls are being unfairly targeted, whether certain gender identity kids of certain religions are being unfairly targeted.
Sure.
So I think the concern from the parents and the kids that I heard listening in the school council meeting that I attended was that there's no accountability on behalf of the administration for where you were talking earlier about accountability for parents. There's no accountability for the administration on making sure that we're not identifying certain groups of kids.
And I think it begins with a policy, a personal appearance policy that makes sense and isn't gender biased. Because if you look at what it is right now, I can guarantee you we are not enforcing that personal appearance policy the way it is written. Because we would be talking to kids, if you walk through our halls and looked at how kids are dressed compared to what our personal appearance policy says right now, we're not really following that. And that's another reason why it needs to be updated, because if we're not following that to the letter, it means we don't really believe that it's written in a way that we support either. So in regards to, if the policy is something that we believe, okay, this is something that, we can support, first of all, there's going to be much fewer conversations with kids. And if there is a conversation with kids, it's because it's something clearly that violates this. And if you're having a conversation with a child, then you should be calling the parent. I believe that. You should be calling the parent. If a child is asked to change, you should be calling the parent. But I can't tell you that's always happened. Has it happened? Yes, it has. Has it happened every single time a conversation has been had? No. And we can do better.
I don't like how the body is laid down towards.
Say that again?
The one sentence, students' attire should completely cover the torso, but that gives me the heebie-jeebies that we're talking about a child's body like that. So I would completely take that out. Hats and hoods, I mean, does that include a hoodie, doesn't it? What about a hijab? Like, these are things that make me question it. So those 2 sentences, I don't see a need for, other than pretty much modeling the high school's dress code. I don't understand why that wasn't just adopted, and why this wordier policy or.
What I would say to that is, there are some districts who have a district personal appearance policy. Regardless of if the child is 5 or 18, it's the same. Many districts don't, because it's, the age appropriateness of students and sometimes what students choose, like cell phones. I know we're talking about personal appearance policy. We don't allow students to use cell phones in between classes during lunch. They can in the morning before school starts and after school. But then when you look at the personal appearance policy, we want to identify, we want to make sure we can see students. If the student needs to wear something that could mask or who they are for religious reasons, then that's that. We're not going to ever balk at that, of course not. But the example I gave is a child with a hat, with a visor, a child with a hood on. One, I don't know who it is. So we want to be able to identify our students for safety reasons, but also I want to be able to identify the emotional position and stance of a child. Children at the middle school, when they put on a hood, that's a clear sign. I'm having a bad day. Something's going on. I don't want people to see me upset, and we don't want to showcase them to all. But let's chat, let's figure this out, what's going on, what's wrong, what's bothering you today? You look really upset, and you can have those conversations. But children wearing hoods and hats, then you can't see who they are. So that's the piece there.
And torso, I mean, my shoulder's part of my torso.
No, so the way we
Seems to-
the way we define that is, so we did some research on that, and again, that Oregon model, that NOW model, that's very, very progressive and wise in the approach it used to create that. The trunk would be from the neck all the way down. Torso is like whatever, put the line anywhere you want, but it doesn't include shoulders. So girls can have their boys, sorry, anyone can have their entire shoulders exposed. We just ask from here to the waist be covered, that's all we're asking.
That policy also includes an enforcement policy, the Oregon NOW model.
This is progressively different than what we have in 4 weeks' time. I'm very careful to add and add and add without allowing us to let this grow in dialogue and converse and then develop that enforcement policy together.
I'd like to just add that we do have a district-wide policy on dress code, which actually...
It's going to be similar to the law.
Short, eloquent, matches pretty closely to the high school dress code, with the exception of the high school dress code saying that bare midriffs and exposed undergarments are prohibited. So you'd be actually more progressive than the current high school dress code.
Correct.
But I think, I echo what Dina said, I actually like everything that's in here, but I feel like we could get to it, you have the right to determine how you want to dress, you and your parents have the right to determine how you want to get dressed in the morning. Period.
Yeah.
And everything else in here is lovely. I think the first paragraph is great. Whether it needs to be here, I don't know. I think that, and we have no enforcement listed here, because we wouldn't need an enforcement if we say you have the right to determine how you get dressed in the morning. But the policy here is dramatically better than what was there, what is here now. So in that respect, I'm thrilled to see movement forward. And as you said, it'll get reviewed next year, and it'll get reviewed next year. And if this is what we end up having, it's dramatically better. I'd love to see data between now and next year when somebody else comes in and says, we had to apply this policy to 27 children this year, and this is how many were 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders, and this is how many were gender identified as boys or girls or something else. And then we could, without the data, I have no idea, and none of us have any idea.
Yeah, and we don't, it's not disciplinary data, so therefore we don't keep it.
Yeah.
He's just really agreeing with Brian.
But I would speculate that it was mostly female students who have been spoken to without us keeping that data, because that wouldn't be data we would put in student records or discipline. There wasn't a consequence, so it's not data that you record.
Can I make a suggestion in the interest of, it's almost 10 o'clock, and we're not going to vote on this tonight? I guess my suggestion would be, and I, you know, and I probably, having been a high school teacher, assistant principal, and principal, have dealt with kids who had clothing that was deemed to be disruptive and had to tell kids to turn it inside out or put something else on, mainly because of what was written on the shirts.
Right.
And so forth. I agree with George, and this is just my bias, that hats and hoods should not be worn in school unless it's for religious purposes, because I think we should be looking kids in the eye. And I think there's so little social contact now that to wear something covering your face unless it's for religious reasons it goes against our culture. I would like to see a policy that didn't talk about body parts, that just talked about wearing appropriate clothing that is not disruptive. But I don't think we're there yet, and because I think we're in a transitional period, and I think we're having a new assistant principal and a new principal. And my suggestion would be to allow the middle school to try this not a policy, it's a procedure, because policy is school committee, but procedure to see if and collect data and see how this works out. And most importantly, ask parents and kids for feedback on how it's working, and then put it to the school council again next year, maybe mid-year before the warm weather season comes in, and see if any tweaks can be made. If we could get to a point where everyone understood what appropriate dress was and made good choices, we wouldn't need to have policing of it. As an administrator, as a teacher, it's very uncomfortable to have to say anything to a student, and none of us wants to call out a student for inappropriate attire. And mainly, it's out of a sense of trying to protect the student from other students teasing or, negative reactions to it, and sort of guiding students about what they choose to wear. And if you choose to wear things that are, out of the typical range of clothing, then you're going to get attention. And some people like attention, and some people don't. And so we've got to sort of, all of those embedded lessons are important. So my suggestion would be, I think I've heard from several school committee members and parents and community members who would like to see this be less descriptive in terms of, if you show your belly, why is that a problem? But, so there's a range of opinions, and the people who have to police it are going to not necessarily be more conservative than the rest of us who are willing to give it a shot to have something that's a little less specific. So my suggestion would be, because George isn't going to be here to do it, is to think about approving this next time, with the caveat that we'll try it and we'll get feedback, and then we'll come back again next year and see if it's an issue.
Can I just offer, though, that when we, as our school committee council has opined before, when we approve a handbook, we are making policy, even if we don't explicitly call it that. But particularly when it's called out as a policy in the handbook, that's not inappropriate, so long as it's not in conflict with the policy Brian's finding. So in other words, we may have a district-wide policy and then something that is appropriately specific to the school. So I don't have a problem with calling something a policy in the handbook, just so long as it's something we would all sort of look at and independently think that looks like and smells like a policy.
Right.
And some of the aspirational stuff I think is good, I just wouldn't, I'm not sure it belongs in there as a policy.
Well, I think the heading was personal appearance before.
I think it
Yeah, it
probably
was.
should be.
So I don't know how policy,
Guidelines rather
probably
than
because the word
Guidelines,
policy has been
yes.
written.
Yeah,
And then I
guidelines.
get confused with dress code and dress coded, because I'm like, we don't use that word
Yeah.
dress code
No.
anywhere,
No.
yeah.
But
I think
one small thing.
Yeah.
Can it be all questions of personal appearance are under the discretion of the administration? Propriety is such a throwback to the old dress code.
So
Propriety is morals, and
All questions of interpretation.
the very last sentence, all questions of it should say personal appearance, not propriety.
I think what they meant is whether it's proper.
I know what they meant, but
Yeah.
it's just such a throwback to that whole
Appropriateness, you're thinking appropriateness, is that what you're thinking?
It's all questions are,
All questions of personal appearance?
Yeah. I think maybe George and I can wordsmith that a little bit.
Yeah.
You could probably just say something like, the
We
administration
don't have
will
to do
use
it now,
discretion.
can we just look at that, just
Okay,
that one?
okay,
Yeah.
Of course, of course.
I know it's a silly thing, but if we're gonna move forward, we should move forward.
I think that's a good suggestion.
All right, thank you.
drive careful.
Thanks.
Dennis is looking good. Dennis has a lot of late nights coming up.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
After me, yes, we had a good report.
Tomorrow night, juniors.
We thrived. Not good.
So we have a meeting calendar in the book. 45?
Is that page number?
4 or 5?
I had one observation on that I wanted to share.
Okay.
November 6th, it's election day.
I know, I saw that.
And I'm although it's not a contested school committee ballot, it will be that's a major election.
It
We'll have
is.
schools that are closed, and who knows, between now and November, might there be a ballot question, maybe that impacts Winchester? Might we be engaged in that somehow? I wondered if the 6th should that be put off? Well, so that's a Tuesday, and our practice, when there have been conflicts with major elections, we don't necessarily move it a week, we move it to the Thursday. Thursdays are our sort of safety net, if that would work out for people, and if it was worthwhile to consider.
I don't have the school calendar for November handy. Please hold, Jennifer will look up this.
You're gonna sing music like you get on your phone when we
Exactly.
Just to make sure there's nothing else major happening on Thursday.
Swap flies while she does that.
Perfect.
Yeah, as long as it's not.
There's nothing on the calendar for that right now.
For the 8th. Okay, we'll put it on as tentatively for the 8th, and then I'll come back to you if there's any issues.
Do we have to vote to approve this?
One quick
You have a
question.
quick question?
As we look at the summertime,
I know.
I think several of us that I've already spoken to, I know will be gone.
August 28th.
August 28th, I know
Yeah.
several of us are gone. I don't know if a quorum is gone, but.
It's not a great day for us either, because we have our leadership retreat out of town that day.
Oh, wow.
So I have to come back for it.
I have to be at a hockey rink 400 miles away on the 29th, but I could be here on the 28th.
Oh.
I could dial in from Florida.
Yeah, why don't we just,
Maybe
we don't
not.
need to,
Yeah.
generally in the summer, we have one meeting per month anyway, not two.
We try that.
Last year we
and-
had 2.
We'll meet with the leadership team.
Yeah.
One of the second one is usually meeting with the
August.
leadership team in August.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we just forget about the 28th?
For now.
For now.
So
For planning
if
purposes.
it's being suggested we drop the 28th, does it make sense to consider moving the 14th out a week? So seeing like the space between meetings, and would you have any sort of critical path stuff happening over the summer?
It's district goals is really the focus for summer. Just making sure we formulate the district goals. And I don't know financially, Ellen, if there's anything that school committee needs to get together to vote in the summer.
We did hear, Ellen and I heard at the audit committee meeting the other night that there's no magic to June 30th, right, for that transfer for special education. We have a little bit of wiggle room there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we leave the second August meeting open? I would like you to meet with the leadership team, but maybe we could choose a luncheon meeting and see if we can do a doodle poll and get it some other day. And we'll post it as a meeting, but if people are available during the day, that might work better for the leadership team, will be fresher. We do our best thinking.
Maybe
Before 10
earlier,
p.m.
Before 10 p.m.
Me
Yeah.
too.
It's not unusual.
Mm.
So maybe early in the month?
Didn't we just ask our kids to go to bed before 10?
It's funny.
You're saying hold
Yeah.
August 14th as a regular
Just
school
hold August
committee
14th as a
meeting,
regular.
But then a second somewhere in August,
Yeah.
TD.
leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I have several members of the team to still hire, so we need to see other availability too,
Yeah.
So it'd be the 14th and then a
TBD.
TBD.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I vote to approve the 2018-19 Winchester School Committee meeting calendar as edited.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
The least mystic is organized time, and then we have job descriptions. And two of them are right where they're supposed to be, and one of them is right at the end, if you're looking at the paper. Let's see.
So, let me talk about, you talk about these very
Yes,
briefly?
please.
Okay. Lori's here to answer any questions you might have. So the first position is a slight revision to the Counseling, Health, and Wellness Administrator position. As you know, Carolyn is moving closer home to work in Lynn, and so we have an open position. We started to advertise for it, contingent upon you agreeing to this job description and kind of moving forward with this replacement of this position. And so, do you have any sense for what we've changed, just broadly?
Highlight what any changes were.
So really just minor revisions. There was, so this job description was just so broad, and it's thinking about what positions we already in place to kind of share the wealth, because the expertise across all of these disciplines is a challenge. So we understand the importance of having an infrastructure there. So under essential duties and responsibilities, we took out a descriptor, that said that in conjunction with the superintendent, this role would create policies, so we took that out. We took out that it would be the lead person for physical education and health and wellness. We took out that it would assist in the TRT process, again, thinking about what we have in place, what we're thinking about moving forward, about restructuring some other jobs. And then that was really it. And then the end, rather than the 12, there was a 12-month administrative position. We determined that it would be a 188-day assignment.
So does that fall under a teaching contract or an administrative contract?
No, it's an individual contract.
Okay.
It's not on the teacher.
Okay.
So this, we pulled back on the days a little bit because we're asking a lot of this position, and we just want to make sure we can meet our salary targets for it.
Is that a change from what we currently?
Yeah, it's fewer days than the
It's fewer
current contract.
So it would be all things being equal, it would be a lower salary?
Depends on the experience of the
Yeah, yeah.
person.
Oh, yeah.
Right, it could be. It could be.
Okay.
Although our minimum, we have a pretty, when you look at the minimum qualifications, they're pretty rigorous.
Right, right.
So, so we're just looking for a vote to support the revised job description. And you want to take these as a group or?
I was gonna say, do them all together.
Yeah. So we have two new job descriptions, and like any other job description that you're creating, sometimes after you've hired for the position, the next year you come back and you say, oh, this is too broad or this is too specific. So we've got a draft K-12 Service Learning District Coordinator. This is as the district takes on increased responsibility for what was used to be Connecting Commits program. We have a proposed job description that makes us a teacher, essentially, on the teacher salary schedule with the same expectations for evaluation and so forth. The only thing that makes it a little bit different from a regular classroom teacher is the expectation that this will be more flexible in terms of hours and expectations, that some of the job responsibilities could be supervising or assisting with service learning projects that might go out of school hours. And the service learning club at the high school, it's a kind of a club, the Connect and Commit Club, is generally after school. So I still, once you've approved the job description, I still need to meet with the union to just sort of come to an agreement for this tryout year to see how this works under the teacher contract. But the expectation is that the K-12 Service Learning Coordinator will continue to be based at the high school, will follow a high school schedule with some tweaks, and will be evaluated by the district level personnel, because it is a K-12 position.
Can I also suggest that we get a mid-year report on this position before we allocate more money?
Right, right. So I think if we're going to take on increasing financial responsibility the following year, it'll have to be part of the budget presentation policy. So yeah, that's important.
Okay, so is this position in the budget that we approved?
So we have actually, yes, essentially, yes. The amount that we're contributing, some portion of what will come with this position is benefits that is on the town side of the budget that we haven't carried before. If it's more than a half-time position, it carries benefits.
May I follow up on that? You were just saying under your breath, since it's a teacher, I just want to be clear. Did we talk about a coordinator of service learning as part of the FY19 budget proposal?
No, because we haven't allocated additional funding. We've been supporting it financially for a number of years, but not under the teacher contract. We've been contributing.
We've been contributing, but not funding it fully.
We still won't be funding it fully. We'll still be partnering with Connect to Commit for some part of the funding.
For the same portion of funding, same share of funding, or more?
No, it's complicated because they were expending significant dollars for medical benefits. that will now fall under our responsibility. So there's we're kind of feeling our way on this, depending on who gets it. The salary will, I'm assuming that the current coordinator will apply for it. And so I think there are sufficient resources between Connect and Commit and the district to fund it for that first year. But in subsequent years, if we move forward with this as a fully funded position by the district, if we see that it's a great position and adds a lot of value, then it would have to be part of the budgeting process for the increase.
Quasi-piloting.
Yeah, it's kind of piloting it, kind of transitioning to see if it works. As Lauren said, that one of the biggest drawbacks to this position is that there was no supervision of school personnel and no sort of very significant encouragement to move this in the direction that we wanted to, because it was seen as an outside
optional.
Right, as a nice to have versus an essential piece of our program.
Do you have any concern about adding an FTE after town meeting, after the budget's been reviewed, as far as the impact on health benefits and whatnot, only because it's sort of not been reviewed by the world, it's just around the table?
Yeah, no, I hear you. We go up and down on FTEs all the time because of paraprofessional support. And Richard generally budgets for a number of new positions and has this year that we are not adding. And so I think that he's got enough in his budget if more people choose to take advantage. The reality is, the only good part about the health insurance increasing so dramatically in price is that the employee portion is also increasing dramatically in price, and therefore fewer people will probably opt to take our health insurance and look for their spouse or partner's insurance instead. With several hundred employees, I think one more or fewer health insurance won't break the bank.
Assuming their spouse or partner's health care is flat or just for practical.
So does that mean that
not increasing by
this would become a class at the high school then? Because this wouldn't have been in the catalog. So it
Yeah.
would
No, it's
remain
not-
the
it's
same
not.
model for the next year?
Yeah, it's not going to be a class.
Okay.
Yeah. So the third new position is the out-of-district special education coordinator. And this is the job description, and jump in, Lori, if I've forgotten anything on either of these. Actually, this is Pam Gerard's draft for the things that she thinks the value add would be. And many of these job responsibilities are spread out. The SPED supervisors and Pam do these things now, and this will really allow us to consolidate. I think she's really looking for a specific skill set, as you can see in the training experience. This person would be housed at the central office and be part of Pam's team.
I have a question about this one as well.
Sure.
It's 188 days. We have out-of-district students who would be attending year-round. I suppose it's fine, we don't have anybody doing it now, so, but.
No, actually, the SPED supervisors.
No, we don't have anybody paid specifically to do it in the.
All of this.
If this person is not here in the summertime, we have at least what we have right now.
So so this will be an individual contract as an administrator. Our SPED supervisors are, and we value them and they're great, so whatever I say next, I don't want to have anyone say. It's a pretty expensive model because they do work in the summer, but they get per diem. And so they get many days per diem. I would expect we may have to do that with this position as well, that this will in fact end up having some per diem days, because there are students who are in out-of-district placements in the summer, and sometimes they have meetings that have to happen. Jen, I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
Just that Pam has talked about that, it's kind of the traditional model that we can move away from thinking you're here for the 180 days and then you do an additional 8. And that you can miss some days during the year because you don't have out-of-district meetings, and then you have more than 8 days for the summer.
Okay.
So it's on an individual contract.
Okay,
to be more
fantastic.
flexible, yeah. So we have not budgeted a lot for this position, and we're asking a lot, so I'm hoping we'll meet our budget target on this as well, but it may end up being one of those areas where we have to go a little higher to get the right person. So I'm just kind of letting you know that in advance. is always a challenge.
And is this position is the kind of position that's just going to stay open until we find the right person, or are you going to really push to have somebody in?
We have money for it.
So I think we'll find the right person. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think-
and they're starting their interviews tomorrow, actually.
Oh, on this, okay, awesome.
I have pushed to start interviews on all of these 3 positions, or to at least advertise, because I don't want to lose the opportunity to hire
Yeah,
before the
that's what I
year's
was
up.
concerned about.
Follow-up is, do we need to reconcile our school budget with the approved town meeting budget before we mentally agree to add one of, this is an addition to the budget, and
Right.
we're still $84,000 short of the town approved budget?
Right, so my recommendation would be that Ellen and I know that our bottom line budget is the approved town meeting budget. And because there are always a lot of puts and takes on the personnel side, that we wait until October to take a look at where we are on the personnel side. I anticipate that if you look at the open enrollment, for example, we may need 1 fewer elementary teacher next year, we may or may not. I know, so they're,
At least that wasn't heard.
yeah, I haven't heard it. I think you do need to vote a budget, but I think it's a kind of a moot point, because the only budget you're gonna be able to vote is what the town meeting is giving us with the allocation.
But what does matter though, Judy, I think to the point is that our school committee votes a budget and it accommodates our priorities. And so while I know a lot would be baked by October, I personally would hope we could have this conversation maybe in the summer where you're not done maybe with hiring, but you've made a lot of progress, right? So we'll have a sense of who we hired and what level they're at and what it's really costing and so forth.
We knew early on this year, based on what we projected for circuit breaker and what we projected for out-of-district tuitions, that we were gonna be in the hole. And so it's been a really hard year this year. I would hope that we've budgeted appropriately, very conservatively on the special education increase side, that we'll be able to know in the fall where we stand with the budget and not have to reduce expenses. Just to be clear on the technology side, I think we're very close to hearing about circuit breaker reimbursement, the additional circuit breaker reimbursement we were entitled to by law this year, at the 75%. And that we have restored the technology funds from the expense side so that Jen can order
120 Chromebooks.
220 Chromebooks. So we have increased the technology line very substantially in anticipation of the circuit breaker monies coming in. So I'm hopeful that next year we'll be in far better shape, summer and fall, to know where we stand with the FY19 budget.
May I make a motion? I move to approve the job descriptions for Director of Counseling, Health and Wellness, Coordinator of Service Learning, and Out-of-District Coordinator as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We'll keep you posted. Lori will come back and tell you where we stand on the hiring.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks, Lori.
We've got a busy job.
Busy. My girl here is helping me out though. We're dynamic.
We've been down one man in
Yeah,
the
you're
office.
napping over there right now.
Rita's been great.
So up to
Inca.
from kids.
Yes.
Oh, Inca is the first one?
I think, isn't it page 69?
69, okay. So, Rachel or Ellen?
Should I just do this quickly? Yes?
Yeah.
Quickly, but with gratitude. Inca has donated a gift of $3,500 to expand the elementary school libraries in support of social emotional skills at all 5 libraries.
Vote that we accept with gratitude $3,500 from the Enka Society as presented.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Very nice that they're putting those books in the library.
Fantastic.
Everyone can get them.
Go to the library and get them, yes.
Page 71, this is a gift from the Laboratory Robotics Interest Group of $2,000 to support and expand and enhance the robotics program.
I Vote to accept with gratitude $2,000 from the Laboratory Robotics Interest Group, New England, as presented.
Second. All those in favor?
Next is a gift from Winchester Rotary, donated a gift of $2,000 for the choral department.
Vote to accept with gratitude $2,000 from the Winchester Rotary, as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Next is a gift from the Middlesex District Attorney's Office, donates $500 annually to support substance-free all-night graduation party for graduating WHS seniors.
Vote to accept with gratitude $500 from the Northern District Attorney's Office, as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The good cause as well.
Yes. So the next is open enrollment. So one of the things I think it's important to note is that in your packet, there are a couple of rounding
Yes.
errors, which I've corrected on, if you have specific questions about grade levels, I've gone in and done the calculations again. I didn't do this on a spreadsheet, which is always a mistake when you have a table instead of a spreadsheet. And
I see what you said, how you thought.
right, so there are no partial students. So I always was erring on the side of go to the next number up to estimate average class sizes. So again, these are estimates. A few of them have small tweaks here or there. My main objective in reviewing enrollment is to try to predict how many students will be on average at each grade level at each school so that we know whether we have open seats. And what I look at is if the average is 2 students below the average of all the other schools, we may have room in that school to move a few students, to encourage a few students to move from where we're more crowded to where we're less crowded. The reality is they don't always move from the less, they sometimes move from the other less crowded to the other less crowded. So, because we love lunch. So the open enrollment seats that I'm suggesting, and also remember that these are our best guesses based on currently registered students and not students who may join us. So this doesn't include our sort of automatic 8 to 10% bump up at grade 1. This includes students who've already joined us and registered for grade 1 next year. And these are the principal's best guesses for what each of the classes will be as they're kind of determining how many sections. So I'm not recommending that we accept any open enrollment students in kindergarten. In part due to the uncertainty. Morocco's the only school that's slightly smaller, but they're all fairly close to 18, 19 students on average. At grade 1, I'm looking at adding up to 3 grade 1 students at Ambrose and up to 4 at Vincent Owen, mainly because we jumped up to 4 sections at VO and that average class size is at 16. And so I think we could take 4 students and make it closer to the overall average. Ambrose, the average is going to be at 17, we predict. Ambrose is not a school that typically has a lot of summer registrations. VO, some years have a lot. Morocco is the most volatile with the up and down, with the leaving and coming. Lynch, they just come. They just come. So that's my recommendation. And then in grade 2, Morocco's grade 2, because we added a 4th section, is at 17, although a number of students in grade 2 are in the partnership program and have other significant needs, so I don't want to bump it too much, but I would say we could add 4 to get it closer. All of the other grade 2s are between 19 and 21 on average. And then at VO, it appears in grade 3, we have some space because that's at average 18, and at a couple of the other schools are at 21, so we could take up to 4 also there. And then I wouldn't recommend any in grades 4 and 5. They're all pretty balanced. There is a hotspot. VO grade 5 has 4 sections, projected 85 students. And then grade 2 at Ambrose, grade 2 at Lincoln, those are both at 21. Again, that's a projection. So we will keep a close eye on these, but overall I'm thinking we're going to need 109 sections and not 110. And if all works the way we'd like it to. What I found this year with open enrollment is often students came in pairs. So parents had an incoming kindergartner. They were closer to, say, Morocco than Lynch. So they enrolled the kindergartner and they brought along a 2nd grader. And so often there was a request to move 2 students in one family with open enrollment. So it doesn't always work out. More people applied than actually went through with it this year. So in the end, I think we probably had 5 or 6 kids who moved due to open enrollment. I'd had a lot more requests this year to have folks switch schools for convenience of transportation. People who live on the cusp of the Lynch-Morocco district want to go to Morocco because it's closer. Some folks want to go to Lincoln for a variety of reasons, and we have a lot of people moving within town. Probably a dozen families have moved within town and don't want to move their kids. And so I generally allow them to stay if the projections are reasonable. So, and I think that's probably in their best interests. So I guess I'm looking for a vote for me to publicize these as our possible open enrollment sections, and start the application process. They fill out an application, and then we look at all of the applications. If there are more applications than we have identified spaces, we do a lottery and pick the names out of the hat. So this is an attempt to equalize enrollment, but in general, even if we don't move a single student with open enrollment, these class sizes are reasonable and fairly well balanced. So questions or suggestions?
Question, I did address this with you, but I'll just say it again. The only one of your 4 suggestions that I'm not 100% on board with is Vincent Owen grade 1. And the reason being, if you added 4 students to that, you'd get to 66 total students. And if we play that forward till we get to 3rd grade, that would not be compatible with 3 sections. That would be more like staying at 4 sections. Whereas if we stayed at 62 and played that up to grade 3, that would be compatible with our guidelines to have only 3 sections. So that's the only one. I played these numbers on all these and see what happens when you play them forward. Because that's 1 FTE that we may or may not need. So 62 divided by 3 is still within our guidelines when we got for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Yeah, right. So I could move that to 2 students instead of 4, and that wouldn't increase the average. 2 grade 2 students at grade 3 students. Okay. Any other concerns or questions?
I just broadly want to say we are at or over our class size guidelines in 2 grade levels at Lincoln and 1 at Ambrose. And although I know Brian had previously asked if there's a way, I appreciate it, Judy, you were saying this wasn't really done on a spreadsheet, and we continue to talk about maybe going back to the old model. This is just 1 page of it, and maybe we can continue to have that discussion, because I'm actually not sure. We should maybe just go digging a little deeper, because I think maybe there's another broader tool with all of sort of the tabs for the different schools that maybe you just don't have access to, that might be a little less cumbersome. But as a tool, it did just what Brian was saying, it plays it forward. You can look into the out years instead of getting out a pen or pencil. But having said all that, at the last meeting, Brian brought up the question of how many classrooms are supposed to be in the building, like something we voted before as a classroom target. And when we last brought it up, maybe a year and a half ago, we talked about the success of the specialized learning centers, which is great. And so we had kind of this number of classrooms, but we said they've grown so much and they need space, we have to almost back that out. So it would be helpful if there's a way, whether it's this or some iteration, to acknowledge, Judy, what those classroom targets are. And I would just take an opportunity to, a couple of quick examples. VO was built with 21 classrooms. We added the 3 in the shell space, so that gets us to 24. However, the LBLD program has been very successful. Grant actually has 3 spaces. I think 2 of them are actually classrooms, 1's not. So now we're down to 22, and then Judy, you moved the preschool over there. So VO's full. And Morocco, although it has a target of 21, we had said the partnership program is so successful, it has the net requirement of 2 classrooms. So it really ought to be 19. We're at 20. Morocco's always sort of squeezing and looking for space. It's just an opportunity to make the point. Enrollment continues to be the challenge, and space is a challenge everywhere. I mean, so these moves that you're suggesting really could be consequential, but we're already out of space, as difficult as that is to say.
Good point. So policy, I put the policy in your book, it requires you to vote each year to see whether you want to do any open enrollment seats. And I think this is the time to either do or not do.
Can I comment? I move that the Winchester Public Schools offer open enrollment seats for 2018-2019 as presented by the superintendent.
With one,
As amended.
I would
As
amend
amended.
that.
Yeah.
And
I would amend that for VO,
Yeah.
right, grade
To
one?
grade 3, I think.
Why can't we just say as amended?
Just say
As amended.
grade 1.
Grade, yeah.
Grade 1.
Instead of as presented, as amended.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So this brings us to the chair report, and I was going to talk about subcommittees. I'm thinking, given the latest of the hour, I'll talk to people individually. And just wanted to point out that a lot of people want to be on the policy subcommittee. And it's a subcommittee, and it's under the open meeting law, the meetings are posted, and so anyone can attend, you know, that wouldn't be, if you're interested, and it's a good platform for learning and understanding what's
I was
going
just
on.
gonna say, it's a great show, isn't it?
I think they say it's a real barn burner.
And that's also
Clearly,
true
everybody
of
wants
the
it. Chris and I
curriculum
made it
subcommittee
look so much fun.
And
It's
capital
true,
planning.
also true of what?
It's also true of the curriculum subcommittee, it's, you know, people can attend,
Yeah.
and it's also true of capital planning, that's a town committee, and has open meetings, and it's a very important source of, you know, revenue for the things we need to do in our schools, so, and townwide, so it's, and another good learning platform. So. I think I can go through and talk to people individually and deal with it that way. So, does the superintendent have anything?
Extremely briefly.
Mhm.
I attended the senior awards. I just want to thank the many community members who presented scholarships and awards to our students in recognition of exceptional achievement, and we are deeply grateful for their support. I also want to remind, if anybody's watching, that there are individual school surveys for the wraparound proposal where we're looking for feedback. The numbers are still pretty low on the surveys, and the vast majority of people who are answering the surveys say they don't need wraparound care. And so it's very difficult for us to finish our planning with such uncertainty, and so we need to hear from the majority of the parents in the elementary, who will have children in elementary schools next year. All of the links have been, I've emailed them directly, so you should have them in your email if you got an email from me recently. Also, they're in the newsletters for each school. So please, I encourage people to fill those out, because I'd like to make final determinations about cost and availability and so forth.
Are you able to pin down new families at kindergarten screening? Captive
They're
audience.
they're already on our mailing list because they have email addresses from us. So everyone is registered for kindergarten as we see.
In other words, I'm just saying, parent, you physically show up with your kid, someone checks you in, and maybe if there were a list, oh, you haven't responded, you need, you know.
Yeah. So that's all I have for superintendent's report.
All right, so that brings us to meeting and executive session. Oh, future agenda items. Does anyone have anything they want to add in the future? We have professional development, we have retirees coming at 5th in the next meeting, and we have a reorganization.
WinPAC wanted to do.
Oh, right. The a report, right?
Yeah.
We are adding a meeting on June 19th that had not been previously
Right.
scheduled. So to make sure you have that on your calendar.
Yep, I got a maybe.
We are adding a meeting tonight.
We kind of been
Still
talking
in
about
school.
multiple times.
Maybe just something to circle back with Dennis on, so we usually, our student rep for the next school year is at least introduced to us before the end of the school year.
Yep.
And I don't know how that's progressing over there.
Yeah. You know, we've lost our chance to say thank you to Megan too. She probably will
Oh,
come
is she
back.
gone?
Well, she didn't graduate yet. But, I guess we could ask her to come June 5th.
Yeah.
If you wanted to recognize her.
I'll email her.
Okay.
Oh, I thought she was a junior.
I'm pretty sure she's the same.
Yep.
I will
Nate's-
remember.
Nate's the
diploma.
I did sign her
Megan was 18.
She's an early graduate.
Yeah, Nate's out.
Okay,
She makes a junior.
so we do have need of an executive session in order to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with our teachers union, Unit A, since an open meeting, discussion in open meeting might have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position, on our bargaining position. So, and we will reconvene only for the purposes of adjournment. So I need a roll call vote to go into the executive session. Ms. Bertram?
Aye.
Ms. Nixon?
Aye.
Ms. Marchand?
Yes.
And Mr. Lino? And the chair votes aye.
Cut now.